Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Luke Jobson. Luke Jobson, a 22-year-old who was on the verge of qualifying as an electrical and mechanical engineer after completing 4 years of study and an apprenticeship. He was a well-liked and talented individual who was known for his athletic abilities, particularly in football. Growing up, Luke attended St. Patrick's Comprehensive and Hawood Primary Schools in Thornaby. He was a talented sportsman, playing football as a center forward for Thornaby Central in his youth. His love of clothes and fashion was evident, and he took great pride in his appearance. According to his dad, Stuart, Luke was a perfectionist who would often check his family members' clothes to ensure they looked their best. Stuart described Luke as a genuine and beautiful person, both inside and out. Luke, a young man from Yarm, attended a nightclub called The Keys on Saturday, January 26, 2019, along with his friends. Yarm is a small town, and The Keys is a popular spot on the high street where the town's nightlife is concentrated. Luke failed to return home after his night out at The Keys, and his parents tried to contact him on Sunday morning, but he didn't respond. His friends were also unaware of his whereabouts. Luke's family quickly took to Facebook to appeal for help, and many people joined the search for him. The police investigation began on Sunday, and Cleveland police released a statement expressing concern for Luke's disappearance, as it was out of character for him. They asked the public to share any private CCTV or dashcam footage that might be relevant to the case. Police had learned about a possible altercation involving Luke shortly before his disappearance. According to reports on social media, Luke got into a fight with several people outside The Keys around 2 a.m. The last reported sighting of Luke was near Yarm School at around 2:15 a.m. The police were investigating this information, but their top priority was finding the missing young man. Luke's girlfriend, Danny, made a heartfelt plea on social media, describing her experience as a living nightmare and urging anyone with information to come forward. Luke's cousin, Jake, also reached out on Facebook, asking for help in locating Luke. He was last seen fleeing from a group of young men on Yarm High Street. Friends and family initiated a search for Luke near the River Tees in Yarm on Sunday, which eventually grew into a large-scale operation. By Monday morning, hundreds of concerned individuals gathered at Yarm School's car park, eager to contribute to the search. Despite many not knowing Luke personally, the overwhelming response to the Facebook appeal showcased the community's spirit. Cars arrived at the car park, carrying people who were ready to aid in the search. Many others arrived on foot, dressed in warm clothing, prepared to brave the cold weather. Over 300 people participated in the search, which was divided into 18 groups that scoured various areas, including Preston Park, Stokesley, Cottonwood, Early Nook, and Hilton. Specialist police search teams also combed the River Tees banks near Yarm School. A body found in a River Tees has been identified as 22-year-old Luke Jobson, who had been missing. Cleveland police confirmed the news and expressed their condolences to Luke's family and friends. Family members are being supported by specially trained officers during this difficult time. In a tribute, Luke's parents, Lisa Jobson and Stuart Banks, described their son as a popular and ambitious young man who loved working out at the gym. Luke's mother, Lisa, said they are proud of everything he achieved and want to celebrate his life. She added that they want everyone to remember him for the good things he did. The news of Luke's death sparked an outpouring of emotion in the Teesside community. Friends and family members flooded social media with tributes, and a huge crowd gathered in Yarm for a vigil in his memory. Almost 1,000 people attended the event, which included a firework display and a rendition of Angels by Robbie Williams. The community showed their support for Luke's family by leaving ribbons, balloons, and flowers near the scene of his death. As the police investigated Luke's death, they spoke to numerous individuals, including those who were at the nightclub on the night of the incident. They also obtained CCTV footage, which corroborated earlier reports of a confrontation between Luke and several others. The footage shows Luke wearing a gray t-shirt, jeans, and white sneakers. It appears that Luke made a comment to someone, which caused several aggressive-looking individuals to approach him. The situation quickly escalated, and Luke can be seen running away from the group as they chase after him. News of a confrontation being linked to Luke's death emerged soon after he disappeared, as speculation about what had happened spread on social media. Initially, the police only confirmed reports of an altercation prior to his disappearance. They arrested 6 teenagers, aged from 16 to 18, on suspicion of involvement in Luke's death, but later released all of them. The investigation continued, and a new development in the case occurred the following January. Cleveland police announced that 5 people, aged 17 to 20, had been charged with a fray, which involves using or threatening unlawful violence, but not with Luke's death. They were set to appear in court. The 5 individuals charged include a 17-year-old, now 18, who cannot be named due to age restrictions, Edwin Taha, 20, Ryan Alp, 19, Ali Abdul Majid, 19, and Hamad Asif, 18. According to reports, Edwin Taha was the alleged leader of the group. In England and Wales, a person can be charged with a fray if they use or threaten violence towards another person in a way that would cause a reasonable person to fear for their safety. To understand the events leading up to Luke Jobson's death, we need to consider the following points. Firstly, when 2 or more people use or threaten violence, their actions are considered collectively. Secondly, for a threat to be valid in this context, it cannot be purely verbal. Looking at the recording, it's clear that Luke was concerned for his safety as he was seen running away. The threats against him were not just verbal. Unfortunately, the exact cause of the conflict remains unclear, as none of the suspects provided a clear answer. Additionally, the whereabouts of Luke's friends, who were with him at the nightclub, are unknown at the time of the quarrel. The police recording does not provide this information. From the footage, it appears that Luke was not planning to leave the club, as he was standing outside in just a t-shirt, with his jacket still inside. The footage shows Luke confronting a group before being forced to run for his safety. Initially, his athletic ability allowed him to overcome his suitors. However, the group, including Taha and other future defendants, returned to the nightclub, got into a car, and caught up with Luke near a school. They sprayed Luke's face with an unknown substance, suspected to be pepper spray, causing him to lose his sight. In an attempt to escape, Luke climbed over a wall into the school grounds, where CCTV cameras captured his entry into a boathouse. Sadly, this was the last time Luke was seen alive. After Taha pepper sprayed Luke's face, the group got back into their car and drove away. It's unclear whether Luke knew where he was going, but given that he didn't attend school there and was disoriented from the tear gas, it's unlikely he understood his surroundings. If this was the case, it's possible he accidentally fell into the water once he entered the boathouse. It's worth noting that these events took place in January, when the water in the river was extremely cold. According to the police, no one else entered the boathouse that night, and Luke never came out. 2 days later, the police found his body in the water near the school, and the cause of death was determined to be drowning. The suspects initially refused to admit guilt, but during the first court hearing on September 28, 2020, Edwin Taha and Ali Abdul changed their minds and admitted to their involvement in the fight. Autopsy results from pathologists Dr. Nigel Cooper and Dr. Jennifer Bolton revealed that Luke had consumed alcohol before his death. The amount he drank was likely to cause noticeable signs of intoxication in an average person. The police had released Edwin Taha on bail, and none of the suspects were detained before the trial. The investigation found that the victim had traces of a banned substance in his system, which, combined with alcohol, made him more vulnerable to hypothermia. There were no injuries or evidence of assault, and the deceased did not have any underlying medical conditions that contributed to his death. While the autopsy did not show any signs of eye inflammation or evidence of being sprayed with a substance, witness statements confirmed that the deceased, Luke, was pepper sprayed and struggled to walk and see. The perpetrator, Taha, later bragged about the incident on the high street. The coroner concluded that Luke was incapacitated by the pepper spray. The verdict was announced in October 2020. In an emotional statement, Luke's mother, Lisa Jobson, addressed the court as the individuals responsible for her son's death faced justice. Miss Jobson described the gang that had surrounded her son, Luke, before chasing him through Yarm High Street as a pack of wolves. She explained that from the day Luke was born, he had been loved, cared for, and protected. He had been their world and their only son. They had been extremely close to him, and he had been a kind, gentle, and genuine person who had touched the hearts of everyone he had met. Luke had been a loving and caring individual who had lit up a room with his presence. He had had good friends from diverse backgrounds and cultures, and he hadn't had a mean bone in his body. He had been a positive person who always strived to be his best and had always been looking forward to new experiences. Miss Jobson expressed that they would never forget the terror Luke had faced that night, and the fact that none of the gang members had had the courage to take responsibility for their actions was unbearable. Knowing that their faces had been the last ones Luke had seen on this earth was a constant reminder of the pain and suffering he had endured. It was a living hell for them, and they were left to live with the knowledge that their son hadn't been able to escape safely. At the trial, the lawyer for Abdul's co-defendant stated that Abdul was unaware that Taha possessed pepper spray. He claimed that Abdul did not expect the victim to be assaulted with a weapon. Only one person, not Abdul, knew that Taha had a pepper spray. Taha's lawyer revealed that his client had a difficult childhood, which had led to poor decision-making. On the night of the incident, something was said that triggered a chain of events. Taha acknowledges that the outcome should never have happened. Taha's lawyer also shared that his client had moved to the UK from France at age 4 and had been left to live with a foster family after his mother returned to France. The judge emphasized that neither defendant was directly responsible for the victim's death, but noted that the chase had led to the victim entering the school and boathouse, ultimately resulting in drowning. Taha, 20, was sentenced to 21 months in prison after pleading guilty to a fracas. He also received an additional 4 years and 4 months for charges related to prohibited substances. 19-year-old Abdul, of Corvus Drive in Stockton, has been sentenced to 15 months in prison, suspended for 18 months, after admitting his involvement in an incident that led to the death of Luke. Abdul was also ordered to complete 300 hours of unpaid work. According to the court, Abdul was driving the car that pursued Luke on the night of the incident. The court heard that the altercation started on Yarm High Street, where Luke was chased by a group of males in a vehicle. When they caught up with him, he was sprayed in the eyes with a noxious substance, which had a severe effect on him. Detective Chief Inspector Sarah Robinson stated that the altercation had a devastating impact on Luke's family, who have been left without their son and brother. She added that the incident has caused immense pain and hardship for the family, and that nothing can bring Luke back. However, now that the case has concluded, the family may find some closure and be able to move forward with their lives. Charges against 2 other individuals, 19-year-old Ryan Alp and 18-year-old Hamada Sif, were dropped. To summarize the case, Chris Atkinson of the Crown Prosecution Service made a statement after the sentencing in October 2020. He stated that although Taha and Abdul were found guilty, the focus remains on Luke Jobson's family, who may find this time particularly challenging. The prosecution successfully proved that both men were involved in an altercation with Luke before his death. However, it is essential to note that there is no evidence to suggest that their actions directly caused the tragic events that followed the attack. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Diana D. Aiello. Diana Aiello was born in 1959 in Tustin, a suburb of Los Angeles. Her father was in the military, and her mother worked at a local garment factory. At the age of 19, Diana met Kevin Green. When Diana was harassed by several men at a bar, Kevin intervened and chased the men away. In gratitude, Diana bought Kevin a drink. They went on a date a few days later, and their relationship quickly progressed. Kevin was in the process of divorcing his first wife. Kevin and Diana moved in together for a while, and Diana became pregnant. After Kevin's divorce was finalized, they got married. While waiting for their daughter to be born, they rented an apartment in Tustin. Kevin worked as a helicopter mechanic at a nearby Marine Corps base, while Diana stayed home to prepare for the baby's arrival, having previously worked with her mother in a garment factory. By late September 1979, Diana was nearly 9 months pregnant. On the evening of September 30th, Kevin and Diana got into an argument after watching a movie together. The impending birth of their daughter had put a strain on their relationship. To calm down and avoid escalating the situation, Kevin decided to drive to a nearby restaurant. About 40 minutes after the incident, Kevin called the local police department to report that his wife, Diana, had been shot and needed immediate medical attention. Police arrived on the scene shortly after receiving the call. When they entered the apartment, they found Diana lying on the bed, covered in blood, with a head wound that appeared to be a gunshot wound. However, upon closer examination, paramedics later determined that the wound was actually caused by blunt force trauma. When the police checked on Diana, found her alive and provided first aid until the ambulance arrived, they asked Kevin to leave the room. After the paramedics took over, they carefully transported Diana to the hospital. Meanwhile, the police asked Kevin to stay behind to give a statement. He told police that he and his wife had been arguing, so he decided to leave the apartment to calm down and buy some burgers at a fast food restaurant. In his haste, he realized he had left his keys inside, but chose not to go back to get them. Instead, he locked the door and went to his car. As Kevin drove away from the apartment complex, he noticed a truck with its back door open, and an African-American man walking back and forth toward the truck. It was late, around 2 a.m. He drove to the fast food restaurant he frequented, but it was busy, so he went to another location a few miles away. After buying a burger, he drove home, which took 40 minutes. When he arrived, he found the front door wide open. He rushed inside and found his wife, Diana, covered in blood. He immediately called the police. Kevin's story had some suspicious signs, but when the police checked the fast food bag, they found the food was still warm and the receipt confirmed the time and place of purchase, supporting Kevin's story. As a result, the police allowed Kevin to go to the hospital, but not before asking him to provide a blood sample for further investigation. Although DNA analysis was not available at the time, experts could still compare the blood found at the crime scene with Kevin's blood type. When Diana arrived at the hospital, doctors determined that her head wound was not caused by a gunshot. Instead, it was likely inflicted by a small, heavy object. Unfortunately, Diana fell into a coma. The medical team worked diligently for several hours to save both her and her unborn child. After many hours of intense care, they were able to stabilize Diana's condition, but she still required surgery. During the investigation, police asked medical experts to determine whether Diana had been sexually assaulted. The experts confirmed that Diana had indeed been sexually assaulted, finding semen on her body. However, Kevin testified that he and Diana had had sex just hours before the argument. Diana and Kevin's family stayed in the hospital all night. And the next morning, the baby's condition suddenly took a turn for the worse. Doctors tried, but the baby did not survive. Although Diana remained in a coma, her chances of survival had improved. However, doctors warned that she could suffer long-term effects. Although Kevin had an alibi, police were not quick to clear him due to several inconsistencies in his story. He had an argument with Diana just hours before the attack, left his front door unlocked, and spent much of the time on a quick trip to a fast food restaurant. His claim of seeing a suspicious person near his home at night also raised suspicions. However, there was no concrete evidence linking Kevin to the crime. Police are investigating another suspect in a series of similar crimes in the area. A year earlier, a series of break-ins and assaults had occurred in Tustin and surrounding areas with similar modus operandi. In December 1978, a 17-year-old girl was killed after being beaten with a piece of wood and sexually assaulted. 4 months later, a 21-year-old woman was murdered and sexually assaulted. In July 1979, a woman was attacked in her apartment but survived, although she was in a coma for several weeks. Her testimony provided no new leads. Prior to Diana's attack, a similar attack occurred in September 1979, when a 34-year-old woman was murdered. A series of crimes occurred, all with striking similarities to the attack on Diana. The police believed they were dealing with a serial killer and focused their efforts on capturing him. To address the growing concern, the police decided to issue a public warning through the media, specifically targeting women living alone and those living in low-rise apartments, who appeared to be the serial killer's favorite targets. The warning caused panic, and in response, the police increased night patrols in the area. The police began by interviewing and soon received their first leads. Several of the victims' neighbors reported seeing a suspicious white man with thick black hair near their home. Although the description was somewhat vague, the police were able to identify several men who matched and investigate them. Unfortunately, these leads did not lead to any cases. A week after Diana was attacked, her doctors informed her loved ones that she had finally regained consciousness. However, there was a serious concern: Diana was unable to speak or remember anything. According to her doctors, her brain was still recovering. Around the same time, another attack occurred in Tustin. An unknown assailant broke into the apartment of a 24-year-old woman, striking her multiple times with a piece of wood and sexually assaulting her. Tragically, the victim died, and the police were once again unable to catch the perpetrator. Diana spent several days in the hospital, recovering from her injuries. During this time, her mind slowly cleared, but she had lost almost all of her memory. Doctors told her family that her memories might return, but warned them not to remind her of anything, letting her remember on her own. After being stabilized, Diana was discharged from the hospital and her family took her home. Her husband Kevin had to work at the military base, so Diana was sent to live with Diana's parents. 2 weeks later, another attack occurred in the city, similar to the one on Diana. This time, the attacker killed a 17-year-old girl. Diana began attending physical therapy sessions and her condition gradually improved. Although she still could not speak or remember the attack, a breakthrough occurred 6 weeks later during a therapy session. The doctor asked Diana if she could remember who attacked her. To the doctor's surprise, Diana suddenly pointed to her wedding ring. The doctor shared this information with Diana's mother when she came to pick her up. Diana's mother asked her daughter if her husband, Kevin, was the one who attacked her, and Diana nodded. Diana's mother immediately took her to the police station to speak with the chief. After asking Diana a few more questions, the police confirmed that she remembered her attacker and identified him as her husband, Kevin. This new information dramatically changed the course of the investigation. Police suspected that Diana's attack was related to a series of similar incidents in the area, committed by a serial offender. However, Kevin matched the suspect's description, leading police to question whether Kevin could be the culprit behind these attacks. The police asked Diana and her mother to pretend that Diana had not recovered her memory and to return home with Kevin. But they agreed to do so. Meanwhile, the police kept a close watch on Kevin, monitoring his every move in the hope of finding evidence of a crime linked to the serial murders. Crime scene testing revealed evidence under Diana's fingernails, where they found bloody skin particles, in addition to the attacker's semen. After analyzing the evidence, police found a match between the attacker's blood type and Kevin's blood sample, indicating that Kevin was the one who attacked Diana. As for a motive, police suspect that Diana's refusal to have sex with Kevin may have prompted the attack. Although Kevin insists that they had sex earlier that night. The police spoke to Diana, and she remembered the attack clearly, confirming that Kevin was her killer. During the conversation, her mother expressed that they could no longer live with Kevin, and the police decided to arrest him. To protect Diana's family, Kevin was arrested at a store instead of at their home. Despite his arrest, Kevin maintained his innocence. Preparations for the trial lasted 10 months, during which time Diana's health gradually improved. She regained her ability to speak. Diana was cleared of the charges, and her husband was found guilty of assaulting her. Kevin's defense team tried to use his fast food alibi, but it was not enough to disprove Diana's testimony. As a result, Kevin was convicted in November 1980 of the child's murder and assault on Diana. He was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. Police learned that 2 similar crimes had occurred in their district before Kevin was arrested, but both victims survived. Although the identity of the attacker remains unknown, these incidents raised suspicions that Kevin was involved in other crimes. The attacks stopped abruptly after Kevin was arrested. After Kevin's sentencing, Diana promptly filed for divorce, which Kevin did not contest. Diana then focused on her recovery. When Kevin became eligible for parole, the committee denied his request, a decision that was repeated 3 more times. The serial killer case remained unsolved until 1996, when police reopened the investigation. Semen samples from the victims, which had been stored in a laboratory, were retested. Police wanted to determine who the culprit was, and DNA analysis yielded a surprising result. Gerald Parker, a man arrested the same year as Kevin, was found to have a DNA match to the serial murders. After the DNA match confirmed Parker's involvement in the serial murders, investigators re-examined the attack on Diana. Parker and Kevin worked together on a military base, and Parker owned a dark-colored van, similar to the one described in the attacks. During his initial police interview, Kevin reported seeing an African-American man near a dark-colored truck in front of their home on the day of the attack. This information led police to consider the possibility that Parker was involved in the attack on Diana. While Kevin was in jail, the local prosecutor updated him on the progress of the bedroom basher serial murder investigation. The prosecutor asked Kevin to provide a DNA sample, which he quickly agreed to. While the DNA analysis was underway, police visited Parker in prison to discuss the case. Although they had not yet formally charged him with the attacks, they hoped to gather more information. Parker initially denied any involvement in the crimes, so detectives focused their questioning on the attack on Diana. During questioning, Parker revealed that on the night of the incident, he drove his truck to Kevin's house, intending to circle the neighborhood, looking through the ground floor windows for a victim. However, this time, he heard screaming coming from Kevin and Diana's apartment, and when Kevin left the house, Parker noticed that the door was unlocked, so he waited a few minutes before entering the apartment and attacking Diana. Parker revealed that he did not know Kevin's wife because they worked in different areas of the military base. He also confessed to committing 6 murders and 3 non-fatal attacks. After Parker's confessions, DNA evidence confirmed his guilt and Kevin's innocence. The prosecutor quickly moved to overturn Kevin's sentence, and he was released from prison after 16 years. The case has caused widespread outrage, not only because an innocent man spent nearly half his life in prison, but also because it took so long for police to identify the real killer. When Kevin was released, the state of California paid him $10,000 in compensation, a relatively small amount. Years later, he received an additional $100 for each day he spent in prison, totaling $620,000. Despite Kevin's exoneration, his wife Diana initially refused to believe he was innocent. She had previously claimed that Kevin was her only attacker. However, after DNA evidence from her body matched Parker's, she changed her story. Diana reported that Kevin attacked her before leaving the apartment, and then Parker entered and attacked her as well. However, Parker said that when he entered the house, Diana was lying on the bed without any injuries or signs of distress. He also admitted to hitting her on the head. Diana's family proposed an alternative theory, suggesting that Kevin might have conspired with Parker to commit the crime, which would explain why Kevin left the house that night, leaving the door open. However, Parker denied knowing Kevin, pointing out that the military base was large and many people didn't know each other personally. Parker denied knowing Kevin. Kevin also denied any involvement with Parker, insisting that he would never harm Diana or their unborn daughter. He explained that he left the door open because he didn't want to go back to get the keys after their argument. And he still blames himself for that decision. As for Parker, he was sentenced to death in 1999, but this sentence has yet to be carried out. After years of waiting on death row, California imposed a moratorium on executions, and as a result, Parker remains incarcerated to this day. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Debbie Lynn Randall. Debbie Lynn Randall was born on August 21, 1962, in Marietta, Georgia, to a loving family with two older brothers. Her parents divorced when she was young. Her mother later married a man named Roy, who became Debbie's stepfather. The family lived in a small apartment building. Debbie was a cheerful and sociable child. On the evening of January 13, 1972, after dinner with her family, Debbie went to the laundromat to supervise the laundry. Debbie's home was just a short distance from the laundromat, so her mother wasn't overly concerned about her safety when she was sent to do the laundry. The original plan was for Debbie to go with her brother, but he was feeling unwell, so Debbie's mother sent her husband to pick up the laundry and Debbie went with her stepfather, holding a box of laundry detergent. At the laundromat, Roy put the clothes in two washing machines and left, leaving Debbie waiting for the cycle to finish. After the wash, Debbie had to walk home and ask someone to pick up her clean clothes because she couldn't carry them herself. However, when the laundry should have been finished and Debbie still hadn't returned, her mother began to feel uneasy. It was getting dark outside, so she and her husband decided to walk to the laundromat to look for Debbie, but she was nowhere to be found. The employee informed them that Debbie had left the laundromat some time ago and had not returned. The news worried her mother, who began searching the surrounding streets with Roy. As they walked, they discovered a suspicious scene. A short distance from the laundromat, in the parking lot next to a car, there was a spilled detergent. Since Debbie had brought a box of detergent with her, her mother suspected that it might be hers. Despite expanding their search to the entire parking lot and the surrounding area, they found no other sign of Debbie. Neighbors who knew the family joined in the search. Debbie's mother decided to call the police for help. The police investigated the parking lot and discovered their first clue: spilled laundry detergent just inches from a parked car, and on the car door, they found several clear fingerprints. The police found fresh fingerprints on the car that were located lower than the handle, which seemed unusual. They suspected that an unknown person might have grabbed the girl while touching the car at this spot. The officers collected the fingerprints and sent them to forensic experts for analysis. They also started searching for the car's owner to confirm whether the fingerprints belonged to them. With no other leads, the police began a thorough search of the area, looking for new clues or witnesses. The laundry worker reported that she did not see anything suspicious. Debbie had waited for the laundry to finish, then left the building with the detergent box. It is possible that she went home to ask someone to pick up her clothes. Police discovered the first key witness, 12-year-old Sandra, who said that as she and her friend walked to a laundromat to drop off dirty clothes, they saw a man grab a girl on the street, drag her to his car parked near the laundromat, and drive away quickly while she screamed for help. Sandra and her friend were lucky to avoid the man's car. Debbie screamed in a car, but he did not slow down. At the time, Sandra did not consider what she saw to be a kidnapping. She assumed the man was a family member who had come to pick Debbie up, possibly against her will. So Sandra did not report the incident to the authorities or tell any adults about it. After learning about Debbie's disappearance, Sandra provided essential details to investigators. She described the abductor's vehicle as a dark-colored, likely 1957 model pickup truck. She also described the man as young, white, with thick dark hair, wearing a white t-shirt, jeans, and black work boots. Another key witness, a girl who lived in the same building as Debbie, shared her observations. She saw a dark-colored pickup truck drive past the apartment building on the evening in question. The girl initially thought the driver of the car was her uncle, but when he stopped in front of her and looked at her, she realized it was someone else. She described the driver as a white man with medium-length dark hair and provided additional details about his appearance. She also reported that he parked his car near their building, next to the same car where a detergent spill would later be discovered. Another witness, a man who lived near the girl's home, reported that a dark-colored pickup truck, possibly a Dodge, almost hit him while he was driving to visit his wife in the hospital. The driver appeared to be in his 30s with dark hair, and the witness saw a girl in the car trying to escape while the driver held her with one arm. Based on these accounts, the police believed Debbie had been kidnapped. They circulated the suspect's vehicle to all patrol units and created a composite sketch of the driver based on descriptions from witnesses. Some officers searched for similar vehicles and checked their owners, while others conducted a wide-ranging search for the girl. As the days passed, more volunteers and police from surrounding towns joined the search. Police questioned Debbie's family, and after investigation, they were all cleared as potential suspects. Debbie's biological father, who lived in the same city, was notified of her disappearance at work and immediately joined the search effort. Police also ran background checks on convicted criminals who lived near Debbie's home, but none of them appeared to be viable suspects. The search for Debbie continued for over 2 weeks without any significant leads. It wasn't until January 29th, when a group of students joined the search teams, that a breakthrough occurred. The students were sent to search a wooded area several miles from Debbie's house. After nearly 5 hours of searching, one of the students noticed a set of tracks on the ground that led from the trail into the forest, suggesting that something had been dragged into the woods. As they followed the trail about 150 feet into the woods, they discovered a human body and immediately contacted the police. Upon further inspection, they quickly identified the body as Debbie Randall. She was wearing the same outfit her mother had described on the day she went missing. However, her shoes were missing. The medical examination of Debbie's body revealed that she had been strangled to death and had also been sexually assaulted. A single dark hair was found on her body, which was likely to belong to the killer. Although DNA analysis was not available at the time, experts were able to examine the hair under a microscope and estimate that it came from a man between the ages of 18 and 30. The investigation then focused on the victim's clothing, which was covered in soil. Police enlisted the help of a geologist to analyze the soil, along with a forensic team. They discovered that some of the soil contained a type of soil mined less than 10 miles from their town called North Georgia clay. However, other stains on the clothing were found to be from a different type of clay, mined by a company just 2 miles from where the body was found. Police theorized that the perpetrator did not kill Debbie immediately, but rather drove her to remote areas, sexually assaulting her in one location and killing her in another, before finally dumping her body in the woods. Police believe the killer may have been hired by one of the nearby mining companies. After contacting these companies, the police searched the employees of both companies but did not find the suspect or the vehicle described by the victims. Furthermore, they found fingerprints near the abduction site, but unfortunately, when these fingerprints were compared to the suspects, there was no match. Debbie's death sent shockwaves through the city, with thousands attending her funeral. Police repeatedly ran into roadblocks in their search for clues. Police officer Morris Nix investigated many suspects and eventually narrowed the list down to 4 people. For Morris Nix, Debbie's murder remained a top priority throughout his career. The case took a breakthrough with the creation of the FBI's DNA database. Experts successfully extracted a genetic profile from hair found on Debbie's body, which was then entered into the database. However, no matches were found. In 2015, 43 years after the murder, police reopened the case and decided to re-examine the victim's clothing using modern technology. The clothing had been stored in an evidence vault since the crime. When re-examined, some of the evidence had degraded over time, resulting in only a partial DNA profile. In 2018, Debbie's mother gave an interview, expressing her hope that her daughter's killer would be found. After the tragedy, she found it unbearable to stay in their apartment, so she moved to another city. Her only wish was for the case to be solved before she died. Sadly, she died of cancer at the age of 78, just weeks after the interview, and was buried next to Debbie. In 2019, the local police department received additional funding, which allowed them to conduct a more thorough analysis of Debbie's clothing. This time, experts successfully extracted a full DNA sample, but unfortunately, the perpetrator's DNA was still not found in the FBI database. Debbie's father was interviewed and shared that he thought about his daughter every day for decades. Sadly, he passed away in 2022, shortly after the interview. Police turned their attention to the first piece of evidence they had, DNA. They partnered with a Florida company that specializes in an advanced DNA analysis technique called genomics. Police provided the company with all the biological samples they had collected over the years and waited for the results. Experts created a DNA profile of the suspect and began searching for his relatives in public genetic databases. After analyzing thousands of potential relatives of the killer, investigators narrowed their search to a family in Marietta. In 2023, police asked the family to provide a DNA sample, which they agreed to. Analysis showed that the killer was indeed a close relative of the family. Experts re-examined the family tree and quickly identified a man named William Rose. However, William Rose committed suicide in 1974, just 2 years after Debbie's murder. Police obtained a warrant to exhume William Rose's remains and took a sample of William Rose's DNA for analysis. 51 years after Debbie's murder, police finally identified William Rose as the killer. At the time of the murder, William Rose, 24, lived in the same building as Debbie's family, and he visited them frequently. The case has finally been solved. Debbie's brother, Melvin, is the only living relative. Melvin attended a press conference and expressed gratitude to everyone involved in solving the case that lasted more than 50 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Cody Johnson. At the age of 23, Cody was looking for a long-term partner. He confided in his friends about his desire to marry a woman who shared his values, specifically someone from a religious background. On Halloween 2011, he met Jordan, who would eventually become a pivotal figure in his life. Born in August 1991, Jordan grew up in Kalispell in a deeply religious family. She attended the Faith Baptist Church, where she worked with children and families, and her ultimate goal was to become a stay-at-home mother. When Cody and Jordan first met on Halloween, they quickly formed a connection. Although initially shy, Jordan opened up to Cody about her dreams of starting a family and her love for nature. Cody was smitten, but Jordan, who was only 20 at the time, was not ready for a serious relationship. They went on a few casual dates, but maintained a platonic relationship. However, Cody's feelings for Jordan only intensified, and he made a concerted effort to win her over. He joined her church, First Baptist, and began to socialize with her friends and community. Before long, their friendship blossomed into something more. Cody and Jordan officially started dating in November 2011, and Cody became completely enamored with her, wanting to spend all his time with her. Cody was convinced he wanted to marry Jordan just weeks into their relationship, despite her desire to remain chaste until marriage. Those close to they noticed Jordan didn't seem as invested in Cody as he was in her. While some attributed this to her shy nature, others were concerned about the imbalance in their relationship. They rarely showed affection in public, didn't hold hands, and didn't flirt. So, when Cody proposed in December 2012, many of Jordan's friends were surprised she accepted. They thought she wasn't ready for marriage after just a year of dating, but they were happy for her. Jordan eagerly shared her engagement ring on Instagram, captioning the post, "He proposed. Best early Christmas present ever." The wedding was set for June 29, 2013, and planning began immediately. Cody was heavily involved, along with Jordan's best friend and matron of honor, Kimberly Martinez. However, it was Jordan who seemed most enthusiastic about the wedding planning, even going so far as to perform a song with custom-written lyrics by Elizabeth Shee, which would later seem eerily prophetic. When someone, including Kimberly, brought up the idea of actually being married to Cody, Jordan's mood would quickly deteriorate. She repeatedly questioned Kimberly, her matron of honor, about whether she was making the right decision. On her wedding day, Jordan's true feelings about the marriage were evident. She was anxious and avoided eye contact with Cody, frequently looking down. Despite regaining her composure for the wedding photos and first dance, Jordan's unease persisted. The morning after the wedding, Jordan confided in a friend via text from their honeymoon hotel room. She revealed that she had not consummated the marriage and had rejected Cody's advances, not only on their wedding night, but for the next 6 nights as well. Jordan was anxious about Cody's expectations and didn't want to be intimate. She planned to use the excuse that her period had started, hoping it would work, as she feared being forced into something would cause her to panic. Jordan had an intense fear of sex due to her faith and reservations about Cody, causing her to feel anxious about intimacy with him. This anxiety reached a boiling point on July 7th, 8 days after their wedding, when Cody canceled his golfing trip with friends at the last minute because Jordan had planned a surprise for him. After attending church and spending some time alone on the lake, they had dinner with friends at Dairy Queen. Cody then went home with Jordan, and this was the last time anyone saw him. When Cody failed to show up for work, his co-worker Cameron Fredrickson became concerned. As a reliable and punctual employee, Cody's absence was unusual. Cameron decided to visit Cody's new house, which he had purchased with Jordan before their wedding. After knocking with no response, Cameron let himself in and searched the house for any clues about their disappearance. However, he found nothing. Cameron's concern turned to fear when he discovered Cody's phone in the garage. It was unusual for Cody to be without his phone, and this sparked grave concerns. After making several calls, Cameron learned that no one had seen Cody since dinner at Dairy Queen at 8:30. He immediately went to the police station to file a missing persons report, and the authorities took the case seriously from the start. Officer Chaz Zimmerman, one of the first to question Cameron, was struck by his distress. Zimmerman found it odd that Cameron's boss, not his wife Kimberly, reported him missing. Later that day, Kimberly finally reached Jordan, who claimed that Cameron had left with friends in a black car with Washington plates. According to Jordan, Cameron had received a disturbing phone call at the restaurant, so she gave him space. However, that night, Kimberly retrieved her phone charger from their car and discovered a text from Cody. The message stated that Cameron had planned to go for a ride with out-of-town friends who were visiting. Cody was unclear about the friends' identities, but Cameron always took his visiting friends to Glacier Park. Jordan told the police that she didn't recognize the men who were involved in Cody's disappearance, and that they hadn't fought that night. She suggested that Cody might have gone joyriding with his friends from out of town as a possible reason for his disappearance. When questioned about why she didn't report Cody missing, Jordan explained that she didn't want to upset him by filing a report if he was planning to return within a few hours. However, as the hours turned into days, Cody's friends and family gathered at the family home, expressing confusion over his sudden disappearance. It didn't seem like something Cody would do, leaving his wife without a word. Jordan maintained her story until Kimberly confronted her about it. As the conversation continued, Jordan became increasingly uncomfortable. Eventually, she became so agitated that she threw her wedding ring across the room. While some thought this was just her unusual way of coping with the situation, Kimberly was convinced that Jordan was hiding something. The next day, she returned home and called her friend. Meanwhile, Jordan was summoned to the police station, where she was confronted by officers about the inconsistencies in her story. One of the officers said, "Jordan, I've gathered information that contradicts what you're telling me. I've spoken to several people, and it's crucial that I know you're being honest." Jordan responded, "I understand, and I think there's more to the story." Around the same time, Sher Johnson met with the police, armed with Cody's phone records from the day he vanished. She was worried about her son and hoped that the mysterious man Cody had called could provide some clues about his disappearance. However, it turned out that the mysterious caller was simply a friend returning a tool to Cody. The police quickly ruled him out as a suspect because he had a solid alibi. His wife was in labor at the time of Cody's disappearance. With all other leads exhausted, the police refocused their attention on Jordan. It was clear that she was hiding something, but her story didn't quite add up. On July 10th, a crucial breakthrough emerged in the case. An unexpected email arrived from Carmen Tony 607, claiming that Cody was dead and there was no need to continue searching. The message read, "Hello, Jordan. My name is Tony. There is no bother looking for Cody anymore. He is gone." Jordan showed the email to Hannah, remaining expressionless as he relayed the news. According to the email, Cody had supposedly died after falling off a cliff in Glacier National Park while with unknown companions. Hannah was devastated upon reading the message and urged Jordan to report it to the police immediately. Hannah recalled her reaction. "I was freaking out, asking what was going on. I read the email and it said Cody was gone." Jordan didn't show any emotion, didn't even cry. She just handed me the email and I started shaking. I told her to go to the police, and she did, but I was rushing her, saying, "Go, move, what are you doing?" Detective Corey Clark was frustrated that the investigation was ongoing, and an anonymous email hadn't provided the closure they needed. In fact, the email seemed suspiciously convenient, at providing the exact information they'd been searching for and advising them to call off the search. What bothered Clark more than the email's content was Jordan's reaction, or lack thereof. She seemed completely unfazed by the news, which implied her husband's death. Jordan's behavior became even more peculiar when she organized a trip to Glacier National Park with her friends and family to search for Cody. According to Hannah, Jordan was strangely chipper during the entire drive to the park, waving her hand out the window as they went. Despite finding nothing on the first day, they resumed their search on the second day, and it was then that Jordan suddenly claimed to have found Cody's body. Her announcement was met with skepticism. "I think he's down there," she said, leaving Clark wondering why on earth Cody would be in that location. It's baffling that someone would do such a thing. This wall serves a purpose, after all. The autopsy revealed that the victim's head and arms suffered the most damage from the fall. Cody's loved ones were heartbroken over his death, but Jordan felt a sense of relief, according to Hannah. Now that a body had been found, the authorities would finally close the case. However, there was still a major issue. The police had no idea who man Tony 607 was. When Jordan was first questioned about the mysterious message, she directed the police to Tony Stallcup, a fellow car enthusiast and acquaintance of Cody's. Although Tony hadn't seen Cody in several months, he was so worried about him that he gave the police full access to his accounts. The police were unable to find the email address they were looking for, and Jordan and Cody's phone records did not provide much information. As a result, they had to contact Google to obtain the IP address associated with Carmen Tony 607. While waiting for this information, the police re-interviewed Cody's family and friends. During these interviews, Kimberly finally shared with the police Jordan's fragile mental state leading up to her marriage to Cody. She had expressed doubts and fears about marrying him, asking Kimberly multiple times if she should go through with the wedding. Jordan confided in Kimberly about her horror and fear of having sex with Cody, even regretting that Ed had married him and wishing she could undo everything. When Kimberly advised Jordan to be honest with Cody about her feelings, Jordan responded, "I should be happy, but I'm not. If I tell him, it's going to break his heart." 2 days before Cody's disappearance, Jordan typed a disturbing message. "He held me down the other night, and he was in my face." On July 7th, the police discovered another revealing exchange, in which Jordan intended to talk to Cody, but was terrified of his reaction. Jordan went to her friend Kim's house later that day and recounted her conversation with Cody, which didn't go well. Cody became enraged, and she left to give him space, eventually spending the night at her step-parents' house. When the police learned about this, they became more suspicious of Jordan. Around the same time, they received information from Google that linked the email address Carmen Tony 67 to her stepfather's computer. Although a brief interview with each member of the Graham family suggested Jordan was behind the email, it wasn't conclusive evidence. However, cell phone records and security cameras painted a clearer picture. The records showed that Cody and Jordan's phones were in the vicinity of Glacier National Park on the night of Cody's disappearance. Security cameras even captured them entering the park at 9:17 p.m. Despite Jordan's initial denial of being with Cody that night, the evidence suggested otherwise. On July 18, 2013, the police brought Jordan in for questioning and presented her with the evidence. She broke down in tears and finally revealed her version of events from July 8th. According to Jordan, she confessed her marital doubts to Cody, leading to a massive argument. Jordan and her friend decided to take a trip to Glacier National Park and went to the Loop Trail. Jordan explained what happened next in her own words. If her friend hadn't intervened, Cody would have fallen face first down the hill. The detectives asked her, why did she turn around and push him? Jordan believed it was because her emotions were overwhelming at the time. She felt immense pressure, anger, and every other emotion all at once. The detectives were interested in her comment about a blindfold, as they suspected a connection to a stray scarf found near the crime scene. However, Jordan didn't provide any further information, and it was eventually proven to be unrelated. Jordan claimed that Cody's death was an accident, and that she didn't plan the assault in any way. Jordan explained that she hadn't planned to kill her husband, Cody. The situation escalated, and in the heat of the moment, she pushed him off the bridge. When asked about the incident, Jordan admitted that Cody had turned his back to her, facing the cliff, and she pushed him with both hands. She also confessed to creating a fake identity, Carmen Tony, and sending messages from her stepfather's house. Despite her confession, the police didn't charge Jordan that day, and she walked out of the station a free woman. However, they later arrested her at Cody's funeral on July 22nd, after she was seen texting on her phone, displaying a lack of respect that eroded any remaining sympathy for her. Rumors circulated that Jordan had killed Cody to escape their marriage without the embarrassment of divorce. Her behavior at the funeral, including texting, seemed to confirm these suspicions, implying that she was more concerned about herself than mourning Cody's death. Jordan's motives were called into question, as people wondered if she ever truly loved Cody. She was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and making false statements. After reviewing the evidence, the jury added premeditated first-degree murder to the list of charges. Her trial began on December 9, 2013. From the start, the prosecution aggressively challenged Jordan's story, raising doubts and inconsistencies. They questioned why she lied to Cody's friends and family, and whether she was truly remorseful or innocent. The prosecution's questioning was relentless, and Jordan's situation looked increasingly dire. The testimonies from Cody's loved ones further damaged Jordan's case, portraying her as a heartless wife who murdered her husband to avoid intimacy. Her defense team attempted to argue self-defense, but it seemed unlikely to succeed. Faced with the possibility of a worse outcome, Jordan opted for a plea deal, accepting a 30-year prison sentence without parole in exchange for the prosecution dropping the first-degree murder charge. Before Jordan was sentenced, she tried to withdraw her guilty plea when she learned the prosecution intended to pursue a charge of premeditated first-degree murder, which carried a maximum 50-year sentence. The decision was up to District Judge Donald Malloy, who had to decide whether to accept her original plea or start a new trial. On December 13, 2013, Judge Malloy sentenced Jordan Lynn Graham to 30 years and 5 months in prison. Despite Jordan's attempt to reverse her plea, her case was not reopened or re-examined. The federal prosecution aimed to set a precedent with her case, sending a message that anyone who commits murder under federal jurisdiction will face swift and severe punishment. As a result, Jordan will not be released from prison until she is over 52 years old. Kelly Clayton had everything going for her. First of all, she was quite smart and bright since high school. She was a role model for other students, active in school, excelled in tests, and passed exams just as well. At the same time, outwardly, she never looked like a girl who spent days and nights sitting over textbooks, cramming lessons, and writing out something from additional literature. No. On the contrary, her looks were considered model-like, and if her grades had left much to be desired, she could have built a modeling career. She could have, but she didn't. After high school, she went to Teacher Training University to become a chemistry teacher, the insane pride of her parents, but only for the first few years of university. It is not known what turning point happened to her then, but one day, Kelly took her documents from the institution and, calling her parents, said that she no longer wanted to study, that she was too young to spend the rest of her life checking notebooks and raising ungrateful children. If she wants to, she will definitely return to her educational endeavors. In the meantime, she wants to travel and live life to her heart's content. Not the best idea, according to her parents, who were so upset that they didn't communicate with their daughter for 6 months. But perhaps if it wasn't for this desperate act, Kelly would never have met Tom Clayton. They met at a party of mutual friends, and the young man really liked the girl. Firstly, he, from the first minutes of acquaintance, began to court Kelly and show signs of attention. And secondly, Tom had a beautiful appearance and athletic physique. And all because the guy was a hockey star. For 4 consecutive seasons, he played for the semi-professional team Jackals, and in it, he was considered a strongman, a player who was able to break the opponent's ribs only if he did not approach the gate. But only a sports career, and especially built on strength and aggression, will someday fail, and Tom had to put the stick in the far corner and enjoy hockey only from the stands or from the couch, watching his favorite team on the TV screen. The couple had to move on with their lives, and first they returned to New York, where they got married, then moved to North Carolina, and then moved to the tiny town of Cato, numbering only a few thousand people. There, Tom franchised a company to rebuild houses after fires or disasters, and worked in a related profession for a friend's company. As for Kelly, after dropping out of university, she worked as a waitress, only changing places, and now she had 2 children. However, Tom was earning well enough, and Kelly could quit her job at any time and take care of her beautiful daughters. But she still believed that extra money would never be superfluous. Besides, she could use it to buy toys for her children and spoil them in every possible way. On September 28, 2015, Tom, as usual, went to play poker with his friends the Millers. He never took his wife to such events. Playing for money implied certain skills and experience in the game. Besides, someone had to stay at home with the children, and a family trip would have turned such gatherings into a noisy buffoonery and would not have brought any pleasure from gambling. That evening, Tom was not lucky in the game, but he did not get up from the table, but on the contrary tried to win back and offered anyone who wanted to stay to play until morning, but no one supported him, and he went home. At home, however, a terrible picture opened before him. His beloved wife was lying in her own pool of blood, badly beaten and, at first glance, was not breathing. Tom panicked and ran through the rooms looking for his children, and luckily they were fine, but very frightened. He grabbed his daughters and headed to his neighbor Derek's house, trying to make sure the children didn't see their mother's mutilated body, and already from the neighbor's house, he dialed the police number. The officer who arrived on the scene found Tom sitting on his knees in front of his wife's body, trying to give her artificial respiration. Only the EMTs were able to pull the man away, who voiced the terrible and unpleasant information. Kelly had been dead for a long time, and neither they nor he could do anything to help her. All 2 floors of the house were drenched in blood. A major mess was in the bedroom. Apparently, there had been a struggle between Kelly and the perpetrator who had committed his atrocity, despite the fact that there were children in the house at the time. Kelly was pushed down the stairs, evidenced by the knocked-down banister, and beaten on the head with a blunt object until they were sure she was dead. There were no hints of knife or gunshot wounds. The policeman who filmed the crime scene noted to himself that Tom was shocked by what had happened and seemed lost in space. He walked from one corner of the room to another, entered the room for a split second, and immediately left it. And he could not tell the policeman where the children's room was or where the emergency exit from the house was. But when asked where Tom himself was at the time of the murder, he answered calmly that he had been at a friend's house all evening, where they were playing poker. Then the policeman, who did not get any clear information from Tom, went to the neighbors to ask some questions of the children. Tom's eldest daughter, Charlie, referred to the perpetrator as a robber. According to the words of the eldest daughter, she and her sister were almost asleep, but they heard their mother start screaming loudly from the next room, "Charlie, run! Run away from here!" And then the whole place shook like an earthquake. The girls, after listening to their mother, cautiously went out of their room, but saw the criminal leaning over their mother and beating her with what appeared to them to be a hammer. The girls ran back into the nursery, closed the door with a small nightstand, and hid under the bed. It was a good thing. The criminal wasn't looking for them, because that nightstand, as the policeman pointed out, was so small that it would hardly have apprehended a burglar. Say, what did this burglar look like? Well, he was a big one, like a bear. That big? Wow, what was he wearing? Blue jeans and a black shirt. He was also wearing a mask, like the one Daddy wears when he goes hunting with Mr. Bourne to shoot ducks. So your daddy has a mask like that too. Will you show me? I'd have to ask him where it is. I don't know. What else did you notice when you saw the robber? He had eyes like Dad's, and I don't remember anything else. I saw him literally just a little bit, got scared, and we quickly ran back inside. Police officers checking the house were unable to confirm the girl's account that the perpetrator was a burglar. There were no signs of forced entry at either the front or back door. Although on the other hand, the gate to the garage was open and the perpetrator could have entered the house through the garage. Another thing that the police noted is that nothing was stolen from the house. Jewelry was left untouched, lying in a jewelry box, and the safe where Tom kept the cash was not even touched. The doors of the cabinets in the house were also all closed. Usually burglars check every little cabinet, every shelf, but here the whole mess was the aftermath of a fight. Experienced officers, it would seem, understood everything at once. Tom pretends to be a heartbroken husband, and it was he who killed his beloved wife and the mother of his children in order to further receive insurance payments. If Kelly's life was insured, and husbands' murderers developing a crime plan always insure the life of their wives, then in case of her death, he could get up to $1 million. All that's needed is to gather evidence and the case will be solved. Especially since even her own daughter said that the mask on the robber was like her father's and eyes like her father. However, the police did not find the hunting mask in the house. After finding out where Tom had spent his time that night, the police questioned the other poker players. "Is Tom the killer? Do you really suspect him?" wondered one of his friends. "That poor guy had his wife murdered, for crying out loud. And instead of looking for the bastard, you want to pin everything on him? How could you think of such a thing?" "No, Tom certainly couldn't have done it. I've known him a long time," replied another, less emotional friend. "He worked 2 jobs around the clock because he loved both Kelly and his kids. There's just no way that could happen. Plus, he was with us all night. We played poker, and even when everyone was tired, he kept insisting on continuing to play." "Tom really was suspicious that evening," said his acquaintance Laura. "During a break in the game, he took me into the next room and asked me to give him my phone to call his wife. He supposedly forgot his phone in the car and didn't want to go get it. I was first surprised that the car was 10 meters away from the house. Go to it and get the phone, but still gave him a call. He stepped back to make the call outside. I didn't hear who or what he was talking to, but when I decided to check the outgoing calls, there were no numbers in the call history, so he just deleted the call. Wouldn't you agree that's odd?" I told my husband about it, and he was as surprised as I was. My husband was sitting at the playing table next to Tom and noticed that Tom was not watching the process of dealing cards or watching the people around him, which is very important in poker, but was sitting with his head bowed over the surface of the table where the cards were hiding the screen of his phone. He had his phone on him. Why had he tricked me then? Where was he calling? Who couldn't he call from his phone? After Laura's testimony, the police once again questioned Charlie, Tom's daughter, and the girl repeated what she had told the policeman the first time. The robber looked a lot like her father. The next testimony was given by the niece of the murdered, already after Tom was behind bars. "I didn't tell Aunt Kelly. I just didn't want to upset her. She was very fond of Tom. She literally loved him. And besides, she has 2 children by him. They are my sisters. Who needs my truth? Tom was not the man he appeared to be at first glance. Yes, he occasionally spoiled my aunt with attention and flowers. He could easily babysit, which other fathers rarely do. But that was all at home. And at work, he was a completely different person. Kelly decided to help me one day and arranged for Tom to take me to work for him. She was too young to be on her own, so she understood me as well as anyone and wanted the best for me. I worked for Tom all last summer, doing correspondence registration and document management. I didn't know him well before that, so at first we had a strictly working relationship. Then he got drunk somewhere and came to the office in that state. There was no one there but me and him, and for some reason he started to tell me that his family was fictitious. He loves his daughters very much, but he doesn't care about his wife, and he hasn't had any feelings for her for a long time. He's even had a few affairs on the side during their marriage, and even considered leaving Aunt Kelly. But he didn't, simply because he was afraid that a divorce might leave him without a house and without money. Looking ahead, it is important to note that some of the interviewed female participants of that evening's poker game confirmed the words of Kelly's niece that Tom was not such a faithful husband and had a sexual relationship with two women who were also playing poker that night. In addition to the information about Tom's promiscuous life, Kelly's 16-year-old niece also told about another employee of Tom's firm, Michael Beard. Michael was doing repair work on houses after the fire, and he was doing a good job. But there was one moment in those houses where Bird worked, constantly missing things, and if the first few times Tom did not believe his customers, referring to the fact that during the fire, the owners could lose something. Then, when the accusations of theft began to be repeated for the third and fourth time, there was no doubt. Michael Bird not only restores the floor and walls, but also steals. Plus, in addition to stealing, there were complaints that Michael was allowing himself to come to work drunk. I was in the office when Michael's stealing came to light. Tom could yell at his employee and kick him out on the street. He was upset with his subordinate's behavior like that. He kept asking him, "How could you?" Or, "Haven't you thought about your family? Where are you going to work now?" After the incident, Tom fired Bird, but still called companies he knew and offered them to hire his former employee. Tom recommended Michael, and when all his options were exhausted, Tom took Bird in to help with the household, cutting the grass, watering the plants, doing minor repairs around the house. The detective called Michael Beard in for questioning. He said he only stole because he and his family needed the money. Tom was very good to me, defended me to the end, but I know it was my own fault. He has a very good wife. She fed me when I worked for them, even though she really shouldn't have. She also gave my children clothes that her daughters had grown out of. I am very grateful for all they have done for me. I feel so bad for Kelly. When I heard about her death, I couldn't believe my ears. I felt so bad. I even went to church and prayed for her to go to the best of all worlds. The police did not find anything strange in Michael's story and let him go, but the interrogation of his wife, Mrs. Bird, made the police doubt his words. According to his wife Holly, Tom offered Michael some work, which he did not say, and for this work he promised to pay him $10,000. Now that was interesting. Michael was called back to the station and had a lie detector hooked up to him. All questions were failed. Bird was lying and therefore failed the test. Realizing he couldn't get away with it, he began to testify. Indeed, Tom promised Bird $10,000 if Michael, on the day when Tom will play poker, sneak into his house, kill his wife, and set a fire in his house. The plan was to strangle Kelly and then make it look like she just burned to death in an accidental fire. Plus, the family home was insured for a very large sum of money. As the police checked, it was true. Kelly's home and life were insured at the highest rate. 2 cans of gasoline were waiting for Michael in the garage through which the house was to be entered. Everything was fine here. Bird entered the house when everyone was already asleep. He quietly began to climb the stairs and reach the bedroom where Kelly was supposed to be sleeping. But the young woman was either awake or awakened by the sound of the open door, and when she saw a strange man in the doorway, she began to scream in fright. Michael was just as frightened and pounced on Kelly, trying to close his huge hands around her neck. But it wasn't that easy. Kelly began to fight back. I had no idea that a seemingly fragile Kelly had so much strength in her, says Michael. A heck of a fight ensued, which spilled over from the 2nd floor bedroom to the 1st floor kitchen. Michael, because of the shock and panic, could not concentrate on the fight, but only waved his arms in all directions or just grabbed Kelly's clothes while Kelly, defending her life, aimed very accurately at Michael's face. And if the police had come to Bird earlier, they would have seen the marks from the beatings on him. But everything turned out as it did. After a long struggle, Michael hit Kelly's head against the wall with all his might. She fell, and for a while couldn't find the strength to get up. Michael took out a hammer and began hitting the young woman's head with it until she stopped showing signs of life. Michael, maddened by what had happened, just ran out of the house, even forgetting that Tom asked him not only to kill Kelly, but also to set the house on fire to cover up the crime. Michael had an accomplice, Mark Blanford, who, in fact, served only as a driver. The day before it happened, I got a call from Michael. I had worked with him on a construction site for a long time, and I had stayed with him for a couple weeks last year, so I knew him well. I knew Michael was into petty theft, so when he called me and asked me to drive while he broke into someone's house, I wasn't surprised. I wanted to turn him down, but he offered me $500. I thought long and hard at first, but he talked me into it. He said he just wanted to rob a businessman, and he needed help to get out of there before the cops got there. He said he'd help with the car. I gave in to his entreaties, but on the condition that I park somewhere far away from the house. He agreed. That evening I waited for him in that car in a dark alley, and he came back quickly enough, breathing heavily and telling me to move as fast as possible. He didn't have any bag or sack on him, which didn't look much like a robbery. I didn't ask him any questions along the way, simply because I didn't want to know anything. I just wanted my $500, which, by the way, I didn't end up getting. On the way out, he asked me to stop at a bridge over a creek a couple blocks south of here. I stopped there. He hastily stripped off his outer garments and threw them off the bridge. "If you need to be shown the place, I'll show you." Indeed, police officers who arrived on the scene at Mark's behest found parts of Michael's outer clothing near the creek, as well as the hammer used to kill Kelly. Michael, already in custody on suspicion of first-degree murder, began to change his testimony. According to him, he was indeed hired by Tom, indeed for $10,000, but only to commit arson at the house and nothing more. There was no question of murder. When he went into the house, however, Kelly was already dead. "And who killed her?" the detective asked. "I think it was Tom. He offered me money for murder and arson from the beginning, but I refused the first offer. I'm not willing to kill a man for any money. He said I had nothing to fear, but he never could talk me into it. You may not believe me, but I almost lost my mind when I saw Kelly's body. I knew right then and there that he was setting me up, so I ran out of the house. He's the killer," Michael insisted. Michael spent a very long time assuring the police of his innocence, and all because he did not know that Mark had shown the place where Bird had thrown out his things, and that his clothes, as well as the murder weapon, had already been submitted for examination, and the experts found both on his clothes and on the hammer the blood of Kelly Clayton. And that was the most direct proof that it was him who killed Kelly, not someone else. In turn, Tom also did not admit that it was he who ordered the massacre of his wife from a former problem employee of his company. According to him, Michael knew that he had money, knew that he was not poor, and because Bird lost his job, as well as because of resentment associated with the dismissal, he decided to rob his house. But Kelly was at home that night, for which he paid with his life. It might have been difficult to prove Tom's guilt and his conspiracy with Michael if Laura, the woman who had been playing poker that night, had not told the police that Tom had called from her cell phone. The detective requested a transcript of her calls and expectations were confirmed. Then, on the night of September 28th at 29, Tom Clayton called Michael Beard. Michael was the first to go to trial. He continued to insist that he had been hired to set fire to the house in order to collect the insurance payout. He didn't kill Kelly, and as for the blood on his clothes, it was just because he was touching a dead and mutilated body. That's why he got dirty. He'd thrown his stuff away so no one would think he'd been at Clayton's house that night. His speech sounded convincing. The jury had been deliberating for 7 hours. In the end, they concluded that Michael Beard was guilty on all counts. He was facing life in prison. As for Tom, his lawyers were able to obtain records of conversations and correspondence between him and Michael, and none of the conversations clearly discussed their devious plan. The prosecution's requests for billing transcripts of his movements yielded no concrete results either. All the evidence was circumstantial. If it weren't for one nuance, the car in which Mark had given Michael a ride was registered to Tom's company, and Tom, coming to the office on his personal Toyota, left it in the parking lot, where for some reason moved to the company pickup truck. which later drove to Michael's house and left there and took back the day after the tragedy. That is, in fact, he gave Michael the car on which he and Mark went to the crime. It was this fact that was testified to at the trial by the jury. The trial lasted 6 days, and the jury concluded that Tom had hired Michael to commit this horrible crime after all. Michael, in turn, filed an appeal. In his defense, he used the words of little Charlie, who said that the eyes in the slit of the mask belonged to her father. However, the court rejected the appeal because the description of the clothes matched the one found under the bridge. As a result, Tom Clayton and Michael Beard received life sentences. As for Mark, he was charged with manslaughter, for which he received 4 years in prison. Tom and Kelly's children were given custody to Kelly's sister, Kim. After some time, Charlie has moved on from the tragedy. She occasionally remembers her mom, but absolutely won't talk about her father, who she will never see again. When Ronald Vinci, a millionaire, first encountered Catherine Pileggi, a flight attendant, he felt an immediate sense of love. Little did he know their chance meeting in the skies would ultimately shape their future. Born on August 16, 1940, in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, Ronald Vinci displayed an entrepreneurial spirit from an early age. In his 20s, he started his first business venture by renting a space on the Pacific Coast in San Diego to sell Honda motorcycles. Over time, his small shop grew into one of California's largest Honda dealerships. Ron's success didn't stop there. He opened several more car dealerships, steadily increasing his earnings. Those who worked for Vinci often described him as resolute and strong-willed, as well as a demanding employer. Ronald Vinci's personal life included a previous marriage to Pamela. Together they had a son named Carrie. However, their marriage ended in divorce after several years. Following his divorce, Ron indulged in a lavish lifestyle and spent his wealth on extravagant toys. He developed a passion for collecting airplanes and helicopters, even acquiring a large hangar to house his collection. Ronald resided in a spacious house located in Rancho Santa Fe, California. He went to great lengths to obtain permission from the county commission to construct a helicopter pad on his property, despite objections from neighbors. This allowed him to commute conveniently by helicopter directly from home. Additionally, helicopter pads were installed on the roofs of his car dealerships to further facilitate aerial transportation. In 1990, the paths of 50-year-old Ronald Vinci and 34-year-old Catherine Pileggi crossed unexpectedly in the skies. Catherine was working as a flight attendant when they first met. Catherine Pileggi hailed from a close-knit family and grew up in rural Georgia. During her youth, she participated in beauty pageants and won hearts with her charm and grace. With charisma and a radiant smile, her beauty and pleasant demeanor attracted many admirers and suitors. After finishing her education, Catherine spent several years working as a lab technician in a veterans hospital. However, her aspirations were beyond this job, and she always yearned for more in life. In 1980, Catherine made a significant career change by leaving the hospital and joining Delta Airlines as a flight attendant. At that time, her annual income was $20,000. She enjoyed her new job, tending to passengers' needs and serving meals. Catherine even had some practical knowledge, like using coffee grounds to eliminate unpleasant odors, a handy tip for dealing with spills on airplane seats. In 1990, a decade after starting her flight attendant career, Catherine had a fateful encounter on a flight. She met Ronald Vinci, a millionaire, who was immediately drawn to her charming and ever-smiling personality. Despite the significant 14-year age gap between them, the two began a romantic relationship. Catherine then left her career as a flight attendant and moved into Ronald's luxurious home in California. They shared a passion for travel, often visiting Aspen, Colorado, a favorite getaway spot for them. Their relationship spanned 10 years, during which Ronald never proposed to Catherine. Eventually, they chose to part ways. Seeking a fresh start and new companionship, Catherine relocated to Florida in April 2001 at the age of 45. She began a relationship with 63-year-old Dilio Carano, an insurance agent who was financially well off. The couple met through mutual friends. Catherine confided in Dilio about her previous relationship with Ronald Vinci, describing it as tumultuous and unhappy. She revealed that during the decade-long relationship with Ronald, she endured insults from him and had to deal with his heavy drinking and public discussions of his affairs with other women, all while hoping for a marriage proposal that never came from Ronald Vinci. On the contrary, wasted no time and swiftly proposed to Catherine. The couple tied the knot in May 2001, just a month after they first met. Catherine seemed very happy with the marriage. After their wedding, they began living together in Miami Beach, Florida. Dilio described Catherine's early demeanor in their shared life as resembling that of a domestic cat, gentle, calm, and quiet, with minimal eating habits. Furthermore, Catherine had a profound fear of water. She couldn't bathe in the ocean or river without experiencing intense anxiety upon entering the water. A few months into their marriage, Dilio began to notice a significant change in his wife's behavior. She increasingly requested money from him, demanding funds for clothes and gifts, while comparing him to her friends' more generous husbands. Dilio estimated that Catherine was withdrawing approximately $55,000 monthly from him. She used educational expenses as an excuse, but failed to provide receipts or evidence of such expenditures. After several months of enduring this financial strain, Dilio decided he had rushed into the marriage and wanted a divorce. Given their lack of children or shared property, the separation was relatively straightforward. Court documents revealed that Dilio Carano had a net worth of $4.5 million, whereas Catherine had only $8,000 in her accounts. As Catherine prepared to move out of Dilio's house, she expressed sadness and despair, lamenting, "What's the point of living? I don't succeed in anything. There's just no meaning in my life." In 2005, Ronald Vinci, a millionaire, made a significant life change by relocating to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Convinced by friends that Florida offered favorable climate conditions and low taxes, at this point, Ron had already sold his car dealerships and accumulated substantial wealth. In Fort Lauderdale, he acquired a luxurious apartment on the 4th floor, enjoying his new residence's comforts. In the same year, Ronald rekindled his relationship with Catherine Pileggi. Catherine, the flight attendant Ron had previously dated, moved into his apartment, rekindling their relationship. Interestingly, Catherine's ex-husband, Dilio Carano, also lived in the same building, but was situated 30 floors below them. Dilio couldn't comprehend why Catherine chose to reconnect with the millionaire she once described as a monster. As their relationship progressed, Catherine became increasingly fixated on marrying Ron. Both Ronald and Catherine were no longer working and led a leisurely lifestyle. Their differences became more evident over time. Ronald was overweight and enjoyed indulging in rich foods. In contrast, Catherine maintained a weight of only 42 kilograms by eating sparingly. Ronald loved lively parties, while Catherine preferred staying home absorbed in crime stories. She rarely wore dresses, opting for shorts and sneakers instead. The couple often traveled together, crossing the sea by boat and visiting Caribbean islands by air. Despite her fear of the ocean, detailed in her diary entries, Ron incessantly encouraged her to conquer her phobia. Even though Ronald possessed considerable wealth, he had a penchant for frequenting budget-friendly bars along the Fort Lauderdale waterfront with friends. There, he would order 1 tacos and strong drinks. He might have been the life of these gatherings, flirting with women, but he often humorously remarked that his appeal to men had long vanished. Their home frequently hosted gatherings where Ronald indulged in alcohol and grew more outspoken. Occasionally, he publicly insulted Catherine in front of their friends, implying she owed everything to him. At these events, Catherine usually played a passive role, quietly catering to Ronald's intoxicated demands, serving drinks and snacks and attending to his friends' needs. This dynamic painted a clearer picture of their contrasting personalities and relationship intricacies, Ron's extroverted indulgence versus Catherine's introverted submissiveness. For 5 years, this pattern persisted. However, the millionaire remained hesitant to propose marriage to Catherine. By 2010, Ronald began confiding in friends about his desire to end the killing and seek a younger companion. In early 2011, Ronald Vinci found himself hospitalized due to severe intestinal issues. These issues were most likely stemming from years of alcohol abuse. The doctors attributed his illness to alcohol consumption, but Vinci noted a recent shift in the taste of his food. A friend jokingly suggested that maybe Catherine had tried to poison him. Ronald dismissed this jest without much thought. In reality, Ronald had neglected his health. His excessive alcohol intake and the habit of consuming numerous pills for relaxation and better sleep were taking a toll on his well-being. In June 2011, Ronald Vinci made a significant purchase, acquiring a new waterfront home in Fort Lauderdale, valued at $3 million. Conveniently located just steps away from where his yacht was docked, the property promised comfort. At the age of 70, Ronald looked forward to spending the rest of his life in this residence. He eagerly anticipated visits from his only son, Carrie, and his grandson. Carrie's occupation as a waiter was a subject of jest for Ronald, who humorously claimed that Carrie was eagerly anticipating his father's passing. On the afternoon of June 28, 2011, the gardener of Ronald Vinci made a distressing call to 911, reporting an incident involving his employer. When the police arrived at the scene, they discovered the lifeless body of the millionaire in a guest bedroom. Shockingly, his body had been meticulously wrapped in plastic bags, tightly taped, and placed inside a sleeping bag along with soiled sheets. And on top of it all was a substance resembling wet dirt, later identified as coffee grounds. Further examination revealed a slashed mattress beneath the blanket on the bed. The gardener informed the police that according to Catherine Pileggi, Ronald had fallen down the stairs, suffered a head injury, and subsequently passed away. The officers had deep suspicions that Ronald Vinci's death was not accidental. During police interrogation, the gardener provided a chilling account of the events leading up to the discovery of Vinci's lifeless body. According to his testimony, Catherine Pileggi had called him late at night, urgently requesting his presence at Vinci's residence. Upon his arrival in the morning, he was confronted with the sight of the millionaire's body wrapped tightly in a sleeping bag in one of the guest bedrooms. Catherine, distressed and tearful, implored the gardener to assist her in burying Ron. She revealed that Vinci had expressed a lifelong wish to be laid to rest in the ocean after his demise. To carry out this plan, she had purchased a blue container intended to hold Vinci's body, with the intention of taking it out to sea using the millionaire's yacht. By the time the gardener alerted authorities, Catherine had already brought this container home and placed it in the garage. Upon conducting a thorough examination, the medical examiner made gruesome findings. Ronald Vinci, aged 70, had sustained 9 stab wounds to his chest and neck. He bore marks consistent with hammer blows on his head and had ultimately met his demise from a gunshot wound to the head. On June 27th evening, Ronald Vinci's friends visited his house. Catherine prepared the meal and Ron provided drinks during their gathering. During dinner, Ron mentioned that his passport and one of his pistols were missing. He also complained that the food tasted unusually bitter. Unexpectedly, Ron, who was known for staying up late, said he wasn't feeling well and went to bed as early as 7:30 p.m., an unusual time for him. His friends eventually found this early bedtime odd and left his house afterward. Catherine Pileggi, aged 54, was brought in for questioning a few hours later, where she provided a detailed confession. She recounted events around 1 a.m., shedding light on what transpired that fateful night. On June 28th, a drunk Ronald Vinci woke up and began verbally insulting Catherine. The situation escalated as he chased her down the stairs, stumbled and fell, hitting his head severely. Catherine claimed she helped him up and guided him to a guest bedroom on the first floor. Afterward, she cleaned the bloodstains on the stairs. A few hours later, she entered the guest bedroom to check on Ron, finding him asleep with a loaded gun on the nightstand. Fearing that Vinci intended to kill her, Catherine acted out of fear and desperation. She grabbed the gun and fatally shot him in the head. During interrogation, Catherine admitted she was very scared and angrier than she had ever been before, feeling like her soul had left her body. After the shooting, she inflicted numerous additional wounds on Ron using a knife and a hammer. Catherine then wrapped his body in a bag and attempted to conceal the evidence by calling the gardener when she realized she couldn't dispose of the body alone. Surveillance camera photos showed Catherine purchasing a large blue container at a hardware store after the murder. This container was intended to be used for disposing of Ronald's body in the ocean. Authorities discovered a gun matching the one used to shoot Ronald in Catherine's car with her fingerprints on it. Her Bentley also contained incriminating items such as a knife, cut-up pieces of a mattress, clothing, and rubber gloves, all stained with Ronald's blood. Consequently, Catherine faced a charge of first-degree murder and was subsequently arrested and detained. Further investigations revealed that just a month before the murder in May, Catherine had been involved in a legal dispute wherein her sister accused her of borrowing money but refusing to repay it. Catherine defended herself by claiming that the money was a gift and therefore refused to return it to her sister. On May 17th, the court ruled in favor of Catherine in this dispute. Ronald's neighbors reported hearing screams from Vinci's house on the night of the crime. Additionally, a witness spotted a white car with a large trailer near Vinci's home early in the morning. This car belonged to the gardener. Ronald Vinci's friends disclosed that he had been contemplating ending his relationship with Catherine for quite some time. The couple had not been intimate for several months and even slept in separate rooms within their large house. Just a few weeks before the tragedy, attempted to give Catherine $1 million through one of his workers, requesting her to leave his house permanently. Prosecutors believed that Catherine's primary motive was the fear of losing her wealthy partner. However, Catherine's defense argued that she had been a victim of severe abuse during her relationship with Ronald and acted in self-defense. Questions arose regarding why she did not immediately contact the police, why she did not tell the truth right away, and why she endured the alleged abuse for years without leaving him. Some of Catherine's relatives defended her in court, and a court psychiatrist identified some signs of domestic violence. Nonetheless, none of Ronald's close associates could confirm witnessing any mistreatment in their relationship. They described Catherine as calm and noted that she never complained about her life. During the court proceedings, Catherine made a startling accusation against Ronald Vinci, claiming he was responsible for the sudden death of her younger sister Angela 3 years prior, in December 2009. Catherine, Ronald, and Angela had embarked on a Caribbean cruise together. Angela had been struggling with substance abuse issues and consumed excessive alcohol during a party on the cruise, leading to severe illness and intense convulsions. In an effort to help her sister, Catherine performed artificial respiration. Tragically, Angela's heart stopped beating, resulting in her death. It later emerged that Ronald had provided Angela with some pills on the evening of the cruise, presumably to help her relax. Catherine firmly believed these pills were a contributing factor in her younger sister's death. In 2014, a jury found Catherine PGI guilty of the murder of Ronald Vinci. Consequently, she was sentenced to 25 years in prison. She is currently serving her sentence at the LEL Correctional Institution in Marin County, Florida. Her potential release date is set for January 2034, when she will be 77 years old. The story of successful and wealthy Ronald Vinci took a tragic turn due to his ill-fated relationship with quiet and unassuming flight attendant Catherine PGI. Despite his many wise decisions in life, this particular relationship ultimately proved to be a fatal error for the millionaire. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Nicole Ford. Manipulation is a special psychological technique that allows one to achieve personal goals without considering the partner's interests. Notably, a skilled manipulator keeps people they need close to them for years, using various tactics, methods, and approaches in intimate relationships. Such manipulation usually makes the other party doubt the correctness of their decisions, feel guilty, and can significantly undermine their self-esteem. Typically, relationships with a manipulator start off ideally, as these individuals know how to gain trust, charm, and win hearts. They appear caring, understanding, empathetic, and someone with whom one can share joys and sorrows at any time. Gradually, they probe your weaknesses and begin to exploit them. Sometimes, such individuals even commit serious crimes through others, in such a way that the manipulated person believes they are acting entirely of their own volition or for the greater good. The case of Nicole is not unique, but it serves as a vivid example of how a man can skillfully manipulate the emotions of women who are in love with him. He kept one lover from leaving for many years, destroying her emotional state with his actions and convincing her that she could not live without him. He persuaded another lover to commit a crime, convincing her it was a righteous act to save a child. He planned everything down to the last detail, but recordings from street surveillance cameras did not allow him to escape accountability. What is known about Nicole, or simply Nicole Ford, was born on July 11, 1989, in the northern part of the US, in a small town in Minnesota. There was almost no information about her parents and early life in public sources. According to some reports, her father left the family when she was very young, and her mother raised her alone, striving to provide her daughter with everything necessary and a good education. Nicole was one of the top students in her school, and she was also actively involved in sports from a young age, particularly track and field and martial arts, in which she excelled. In her senior years of school, she decided that she wanted to dedicate her life to fighting crime and would serve in law enforcement. She did everything possible to successfully pass the exams and meet the physical standards required for admission to the police academy, graduating with honors. After finishing school and being admitted to the academy, Nicole moved from the small provincial town to the large metropolis of Minneapolis. In 2010, she was accepted into the Criminal Investigation Department of the main police headquarters in Minneapolis as an assistant investigator, and after several years of dedicated service, she was appointed as an investigator. Colleagues described her as a determined, goal-oriented woman and a fearless officer ready to take risks. However, in her personal life, without realizing it, Nikki became a pawn in the hands of a sophisticated manipulator, the perfect start to a doomed relationship. In 2012, at a Taekwondo competition, 23-year-old Nicole met a coach and martial arts master, Timothy "Tim" Amma, who was 8 years her senior, and initially didn't spark much interest in her. However, the slender young beauty with luxurious long hair and a charming smile immediately caught his attention. It's worth noting that Timothy was known as a ladies' man, with numerous romantic partners, whom he frequently changed and sometimes dated several women at the same time. He was skilled in winning over women he liked and was not accustomed to rejections. Timothy also lived in Minneapolis, quickly found out where Nikki trained, and obtained her phone number. He initially offered her personal training services, but almost immediately began courting her, quickly winning over her heart. Nicole saw Tim as a kind, open, and charming man. She developed a sincere affection for him, and before she knew it, she had fallen deeply in love. Soon, they started a romantic relationship and began dating. Initially, the man behaved gallantly, showed care, and made every effort to demonstrate that he was a reliable person one could depend on. Amahara was strong, intelligent, eloquent, and had the ability to dominate the women who fell in love with him. The relationship progressed rapidly, and after a month and a half, they decided to move in together and live under the same roof. The first 6 months went wonderfully, and Nicole felt happy and loved next to this person. She opened up and trusted him, believing there were no secrets between them. However, Timothy's behavior gradually began to change. He revealed his true nature, but he did so subtly enough that his chosen one was not alarmed for quite some time. The sophisticated tormentor, Timothy, was an attractive, witty, and charismatic man with a muscular build, enjoying success with the opposite gender. He took great pride in himself, and even after entering into a serious relationship, he did not stop flirting with other women, often doing so in Nicole's presence, which deeply hurt her and made her feel humiliated. At first, Nicole hoped that over time, her boyfriend would shake off his bachelor habits, become more restrained, and settle down. But months passed, and nothing changed. Meanwhile, Tim assured her that he loved only her and was passionate and tender as a partner. But outside the home, he did not miss a single opportunity to flirt and regularly engaged in affairs. Soon, Tim became openly annoyed by his girlfriend's jealousy. He began to snap at her, stating that he would behave as he wanted, and she had no right to tell him otherwise. However, he usually apologized afterward, telling Nicole that no one would ever love her as much as he did. And she forgave him, continuing to make future plans. In the fall of 2014, during a minor domestic argument, Timothy unexpectedly flew into a rage, grabbed Nicole by the throat, and squeezed so hard that she couldn't breathe and almost lost consciousness. Suddenly, he came to his senses, let Nicole go, and pushed her so hard that she fell, hitting a wall. At that moment, she realized that this was an unhealthy relationship that needed to be ended immediately. However, her emotional attachment to the man was too strong, and it only took another apology from him for her to forgive him. In addition to bouts of aggression and infidelity, another extremely unpleasant trait of Tim's came to light. He was extremely jealous and obsessed with control. The man monitored every step his chosen one took her phone without permission, checked her contact lists, messages in messengers and social networks, and kept a close eye on who she talked to and where she was. This continued for several years. Tim could cause a scandal out of nowhere, unjustly accusing his beloved of infidelity, while he himself did not miss an opportunity to be unfaithful. He often resorted to physical violence, but continued to convince Nicole that no one would ever love her as he did if she ever attempted to leave. When ending the relationship, the man resorted to blackmail, claiming that he would end his life and it would be on her conscience. In November 2015, after another argument that ended in violence, Nicole packed her bags and, with a suitcase in hand, left the house. Timothy, who until the last moment did not believe she would do it, saw his partner leaving, chased her down outside, grabbed her by the hair, and dragged her back into the house. But the woman began to scream and struggle, attracting the attention of neighbors, and the man was forced to back down, letting her go. After so many years in an abusive and manipulative relationship, Nicole could finally breathe a sigh of relief. However, Tim had no intention of leaving her alone. He merely switched tactics, moving from threats and blackmail back to romantic pursuits. He met her after work, sent flowers to her home, wrote messages filled with tenderness, and pleaded for a chance to start over. For over a month, Nicole was resolute and had no plans to return to her former lover. But in December of that same year, she unexpectedly discovered that she was pregnant. This was certainly not in her plans, but the thought of not keeping the baby never crossed her mind. She knew that if her ex-boyfriend found out about her pregnancy, it would provide him with perfect leverage for manipulation in an attempt to win her back. So, she tried to hide her pregnancy, but was unsuccessful. They still shared many mutual friends and acquaintances, so by January 2016, information about her expecting a child reached Timothy. There was no doubt about who the father was, prompting him to urge her to return to him, arguing that their child should be raised in a complete family. Nicole, who had grown up without a father herself, understood how challenging it would be for her and the baby. But she also realized that a life with a manipulative and cruel person would not lead to anything good. She adamantly refused to return to her ex-boyfriend, though she still had feelings for him, but she noted that she would allow him to participate in the life and upbringing of their child as a nominal father. On June 20th, 2016, Nicole gave birth to a healthy boy whom she named Callahan Amur, as her former lover acknowledged paternity and declared his readiness to raise the child with her. However, it soon became clear that giving the baby this man's surname and registering him as the parent was far from the best idea. Despite Tim's assurances that he would be a good father and his pleas to reunite so that Callahan could grow up in a complete family, in reality, he showed no interest in his son. The man had hoped that the child would become a reliable tool for manipulating his ex-girlfriend. But Nicole was no longer susceptible, and Amir quickly lost interest in the baby. Nicole took nearly a year of maternity leave and devoted herself entirely to caring for her little son. She hadn't even thought about new relationships, immersing herself completely in motherhood. Meanwhile, Timothy continued his carefree life with numerous lovers and casual connections. It got to the point where he had a signal, a purple light in his bedroom, which meant that the homeowner was alone and expecting company. Any of his lovers could respond to this signal, and after which, the purple light would go out, signaling to others that Tim's bed was already taken. It was like something out of a red light district, but the man and his numerous partners were quite satisfied with this arrangement. In the same year of 2016, shortly after the birth of Callahan, 36-year-old Amir moved in and began living with his 18-year-old protege named Colin Ison. He had been training the young woman since she was 14, and she was deeply in love with her mentor, despite the significant age difference. Initially, the couple hid their close relationship, and to outsiders, they claimed that Colin was just renting a room in his house. However, it soon became apparent to everyone that a fiery romance was unfolding between the coach and his ward. Timothy was thrilled with his young lover, and according to friends, the girl resembled a naive child, trying her hardest to impress the man she absolutely adored. By the summer of 2017, Nicole was forced to return to work. She was raising her child alone, as the boy's father was hardly any help, and the young mother simply ran out of money, prompting her to end her maternity leave early. At that time, she was working as a forensic expert at the main police headquarters in Minneapolis, and her work schedule could be unpredictable. During the day, little Callahan was in daycare, but if his mother was held up at work or called in unexpectedly, she would ask Timothy to look after their son. There were a few reasons for this. First, she believed it was beneficial for the boy to spend time with his father, who had recently vowed to be involved in his upbringing. Second, since her former lover was not helping financially, she thought he could at least save her the cost of nanny services. Amir did not enjoy spending time with the child. It was a burden to him, and he was unwilling to take on the responsibility. Thus, he shifted it, along with all related troubles, onto his young lover. Colin quickly developed a fondness for the little boy and loved taking care of him. Thus, the man dumped his parental responsibilities on the girl, explaining it by telling her that Nicole was a bad mother who did not want to care for her child and was looking for any excuse to offload her son onto them. In the spring of 2017, Nicole, for the first time since breaking up with Tim, entered into a romantic relationship. Her new partner was a fellow police officer named Donovan Ford. He treated his beloved with tenderness and care, and also felt paternal towards Callahan, expressing readiness to adopt the boy. Everything seemed wonderful, but that was until Amir found out about his ex's new relationship. Timothy did not love Nicole and had long stopped trying to establish any relationship with her. But the mere fact that she was now not alone and happy enraged him. It also ignited a furious desire to annoy or completely destroy these relationships. As his main weapon in this endeavor, he decided to use their son as well as the naive Colin, who believed every word he said. The child's father regularly reported to social services that Donovan was beating, tormenting, and treating his son cruelly, and that the boy's mother was doing nothing to stop it. As a result, Child Protective Services frequently visited the family. They never managed to confirm any instance of domestic violence, but each time, Nicole and her new lover were interrogated like criminals. They knew who was trying to ruin their lives, but were powerless to stop it. And this continued for years. Simultaneously, Timothy kept convincing Colin that Callahan was in danger, that Nikki and Donovan were cruel to him, and that one day they might simply end his life in what they would claim was an accident. The girl believed her lover, felt terribly sorry for the boy who had literally grown up before her eyes and was ready to protect him. Timothy literally harassed his ex and her new partner, threatened them, tried to provoke them, and even filed police reports, claiming that these law enforcement officers were abusing their official powers, hoping they would be fired. Donovan tried to have a man-to-man talk with Timothy, but it yielded no results. The ex-boyfriend continued to terrorize his former girlfriend and her new boyfriend, turning their lives into a real nightmare. In the battle for the little son, Tim decided not to stop at just threats and harassment and soon took the matter to court, claiming his rights to the child and his desire for sole custody. Nicole did not anticipate this and was genuinely frightened, knowing her ex's ability to lie and manipulate. She understood that he didn't actually want his son. He just wanted to get back at her for her happiness with Donovan. At the same time, Nicole finally decided to seek a restraining order against Timothy, citing his erratic behavior and the threat he posed. She was confident that the custody issue would likely resolve in her favor, but she also realized that the legal battles could drag on for years, as Tim was not one to back down easily. Meanwhile, Timothy continued to poison his ex-girlfriend's life, concocting various fabrications. He even tried to accuse her of attempting to take his life, claiming she had tried to run him over with her car. He claimed that he managed to jump away just in time, and that Nicole only ran over his foot. Astonishingly, he took this case to court, but he couldn't prove anything since there were no witnesses, no camera footage, and importantly, no actual injury. In September 2022, the custody case went to court. The man once again tried to slander his former lover, accusing her of harming their child, and even secured support from Colin, who corroborated his story. He also tried to persuade little Callahan to say that his mom and Donovan were hitting him, but the child not only refused to lie, but also revealed that his father was coaxing him to lie by promising him sweets. The court took the child's account into consideration and awarded sole custody to the mother. Nicole was about to breathe a sigh of relief, but Timothy persisted and appealed the decision. Initially, he secured the right to see the child once a week under the mother's supervision, and later he was allowed to spend time alone with the boy without Nicole's presence, which greatly upset and frightened her, as anything could be expected from him. Ultimately, after several more court appeals, and to avoid further disputes, Timothy was allowed to see his son at a specialized family center designed to prevent parents in conflict from encountering each other and causing further psychological damage to the children. The facility had multiple separate parking lots and separate entrances, so one parent could bring the child for the other parent to meet. But the ex-spouses did not interact or even see each other. The mysterious attacker, on April 19, 2022, when Nicole arrived at the family center to pick up her son after another visit with his father, something unforeseen happened. She parked her car and was heading towards the entrance, but she didn't make it inside. Suddenly, a person dressed in black clothing, a mask, and a hood approached her, pulled out a gun, and shot her 4 times at close range, then quickly disappeared in an unknown direction in a black pickup. Incredibly, Nicole not only remained conscious, but also managed to dial emergency services. However, she couldn't convey anything to the dispatcher. One of the bullets hit her neck, missing the carotid artery by a millimeter, and damaging her vocal cords, so she could only make gurgling sounds. At that moment, a woman who happened to witness the event came to her aid. She was just passing by when she heard the shots and saw the fleeing black figure jump into a vehicle and disappear. The woman quickly pulled over, made sure the shooter had left, and then rushed to help the victim. She was the one who explained to the dispatcher what had happened, provided the address, and pressed her clothing against Nicole's wounds to stop the bleeding, saving her life. The victim spent several days teetering on the brink of life and death in a coma. She lost a lot of blood, and her vital organs were affected. But despite the severity of her injuries, doctors managed to stabilize her condition. Medical professionals believed Nicole was incredibly lucky, as death was only millimeters away from 2 bullets. One passed near an artery, and the other nearly struck her heart. The woman survived, and now it was necessary to figure out who wanted her dead. Prime suspect. Nicole had no doubt that her ex-lover was the one who had shot her, which she reported to the police as soon as she regained consciousness. Earlier, while the woman was in a coma, Donovan had also informed the police that apart from Timothy, the victim had no other enemies. Timothy was indeed interrogated and checked first, but he had a solid alibi, as he was at the family center with his son at the time of the attack, confirmed by staff and internal surveillance footage. Simultaneously, the theory was investigated that someone among the criminals she had previously arrested and helped incarcerate individuals who might have organized the attack on the police officer and investigator. Undoubtedly, due to her profession, she could have had ill wishes, but Nicole herself was convinced that Timothy was involved in the assassination attempt. At the scene, 4 casings were found, and a camera at the nearest intersection captured a suspicious black Dodge Ram pickup running a red light without license plates. This same vehicle was mentioned by the eyewitness, who had essentially saved the victim's life. Thus, it was necessary to check what vehicles Timothy owned. During another interrogation, the suspect mentioned that he had a Chevrolet Traverse SUV in his garage, and he also owned a Dodge Challenger. However, according to Timothy, he never had a pickup. Yet, the investigation showed that the man was lying, and a black Dodge Ram, identical to the one used by the shooter, was registered in his name. Once the truth emerged, Timothy was arrested pending further investigation. When shown the surveillance footage, he recalled that he did indeed have such a vehicle, but claimed he rarely used it, and it mostly sat idle. Moreover, he noted that his pickup had colorful stickers on the doors and hood. This was verified, and indeed his vehicle had stickers, but they looked as though they had been applied just recently. Nonetheless, all the evidence was circumstantial, and law enforcement needed to find the weapon and the actual shooter to fully resolve the case. It turned out that Timothy's vehicle was equipped with a satellite navigation system which allowed the tracing of the vehicle's entire route on that day. It was discovered that the car was brought to the back entrance of a school on the evening of April 18th. There it remained all night and almost the entire next day. Road cameras traced that the vehicle arrived there with license plates, but by the next evening, it left without them. The person who used the vehicle that day was of short stature, slight build, and from a distance, the silhouette appeared feminine. As a result, it was decided to immediately detain and interrogate Timothy's live-in girlfriend, Colin Larson. A search was also conducted at the couple's home, and although the weapon used in the crime was not found, law enforcement discovered ammunition of the same caliber used by the shooter. The frightened girl almost immediately began to give confessional testimony, confirming that Timothy was the mastermind behind the crime. However, Colin believed that her lover had acted with good intentions, thinking they were trying to radically save little Callahan from a cruel mother. Timothy had spent years manipulating his trusting young girlfriend, convincing her that the boy was being mistreated and subjected to violence, and she unquestioningly believed every word her lover said. She felt immensely sorry for the child, and believed that Timothy wished his son well and wanted to protect him. The trial of the conspirators began in November of the same year. Colin confessed that her lover had provided her with the firearm and had taken the pistol back after the assassination attempt and disposed of it, but she did not know what exactly he did with it. The prosecution was largely built on circumstantial evidence, a point that the defendant's lawyers emphasized. Nevertheless, the decisive factor was Colin's confession, who still could not believe that her lover had deceived her and believed that they were committing a righteous act. The court also considered the testimony of the victim herself about what kind of person Timothy was and how skillfully he had always managed to manipulate the women who loved him. 42-year-old Timothy was found guilty of organizing a first-degree attempted murder, as well as incitement and aiding and abetting. He was sentenced to 18 years in prison, the maximum term for such cases. 24-year-old Colin Larson, as the executor, received 16 years in prison. A year after the assassination attempt, Nicole managed to fully recover physically and emotionally. She and Donovan officially legalized their relationship, and the man became the best father Callahan could ever wish for. The now married couple is expecting their first child together, and the woman who saved Nicole's life then will be the child's godmother. Finally, it should be added that Timothy, with good behavior, will be eligible for parole in 2035. However, he will be prohibited from coming within 100 meters of his son, former lover, and her family members, and from attempting any form of contact with them. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Megan Landowski. The case of Megan Landowski, who lived near the Chesapeake Bay in Portsmouth, Virginia, a bustling seaport town that is home to both the U.S. Navy and Coast Guard. Megan's family included Navy officer Chris Short, his wife Angela, and their three stepchildren, Elizabeth Gable, Megan Landowski, and Corey Landowski. Having spent a year stationed at the naval base in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, Chris was transferred to a naval hospital in Portsmouth, which was a relief for his family. Megan Landowski, the eldest sibling at 16 years old, promptly enrolled in dance classes after their relocation. Megan had a deep passion for dance and exhibited remarkable talent and aptitude from the beginning, starting with ballet and quickly expanding her repertoire to include various dance genres. Her mother described her as beautiful, friendly, and talented, and Megan easily integrated into her new academic environment at Woodrow Wilson High School. Megan had a magnetic personality that effortlessly attracted classmates, allowing her to quickly forge friendships. Although she attended a prestigious high school primarily focused on dance, Megan expressed a desire to attend a regular high school in order to be with friends from her neighborhood. Described as vivacious and kind, Megan had a natural inclination for making connections and embracing friendships with everyone she encountered. Thursday, April 10th, 2008, dawned like any other bright spring morning. Megan woke up early from school, engaging in a conversation with her mother regarding an impending test before heading off for her classes. After exchanging farewells, they went their separate ways, unaware that this would be the last time Angela laid eyes on her daughter alive. Megan's school day ended early, and she went home. Her mother told her to call when she reached home. Upon arrival, Megan left a voicemail detailing how her day went, reassuring her mother of her safe return, and ending by telling her she loved her. She then went on to begin preparing lunch for herself. However, things took a dark and disturbing turn around 4 p.m. that afternoon. Chris, Megan's stepfather, returned home to find the front door open. Though initially unconcerned, knowing Megan had been warned about leaving it open, he intended to reprimand her. Calling out her name yielded only silence as he moved through the house. Upon entering the kitchen, he was confronted with a harrowing sight. Megan, lifeless on the floor, a victim of murder. Chris would later recall how he found her, likening her to a porcelain doll, hauntingly still and staring out into the void. Local detective Doug Funkhauser was on his way to celebrate his anniversary with his wife when he received the distressing call about a young girl's murder in town. Rushing to Roberts Court in Portsmouth, he was confronted with a horrifying sight. Blood stains on the door handle caught his attention as he approached the residence. Inside, in the kitchen, he discovered the gruesome scene. The teenager's partially naked body sprawled on the floor. Megan lay amidst a sizable pool of blood, bearing multiple stab wounds across her back, neck, face, and throat, with her mouth sealed shut with tape. For Detective Funkhauser, a seasoned investigator, this case stood out as one of the most brutal he had ever encountered, compounded by the fact that the victim was a young child. The thought of his own 3 children intensified his determination to bring the perpetrator to justice. Despite Megan not inviting the killer into her house, there were no signs of forced entry. However, a leaf found inside, traced back to the bush by the window, showed that the assailant had entered through the first-floor window. The attack started in an upstairs bedroom, evident from the messy bed that indicated a struggle. Her underwear was on the floor, and a tape dispenser under the left corner of the bed matched the tape used to bind her. Blood-stained tape was collected for analysis. Police took pillows, sheets, and blankets for forensic examination. Disturbing evidence was found in the bedroom. Seminal fluid on the duvet and in Megan's underwear suggested she was sexually assaulted before the brutal attack downstairs. Megan had 43 stab wounds, 11 after her death. She was discovered naked from the waist down, with her arms bound behind her with tape. The forensic team quickly identified the potential murder weapon. They found a knife missing from the kitchen counter holder, eventually locating it in the sink. Megan was first attacked in her room, but escaped downstairs before being fatally assaulted. The perpetrator moved through the house, leaving footprints, and washed their hands in the sink, leaving behind one of the 2 knives used in the murder. The other knife, taken from the kitchen block, was found in a storm drain nearby. Detectives realized they had to apprehend the murderer promptly. The investigation began swiftly, with officers thoroughly searching the area, looking for witnesses who may have seen or heard something suspicious during the crime. Unfortunately, no one provided any useful information, and it seemed like the culprit had fled unnoticed. The town was gripped by fear, with parents worried about their children's safety, many too scared to sleep at night, aware that a killer was on the loose. After their daughter's murder, Angela and Chris quickly told the police they suspected Robert Hickey, a friend of Chris from the Navy who had a troubled past. When Megan was 16, Robert, who also worked with Chris, sexually assaulted her. Megan started acting differently and doing poorly in school. Chris noticed and asked her what was wrong. Eventually, Megan admitted that Robert was abusing her. Chris was angered and disgusted, immediately cutting off all connections with the Hickey family and reporting the abuse. At this point, Megan's parents had initiated legal action just 5 months before her murder, with a trial awaiting. They now suspected that Robert had killed Megan to prevent her from testifying against him, fearing the potential damage to his reputation and the risk of incarceration. Megan had even voiced concerns about him coming after her, and tragically, it appeared her apprehensions had materialized. Officers went to Hickey's house looking for evidence related to a murder, but they didn't find anything incriminating. However, when they checked his computer later on, they saw that someone had tried to delete everything on the hard drive. A file that had been recently deleted was found, showing illegal pictures of underage kids. This led to Hickey being charged with having child pornography and made him the main suspect in the murder case. He was brought in for questioning regarding the murder, with authorities hoping for a confession. Despite appearing visibly nervous during the interview, Robert claimed to have been at the Navy base the entire day of Megan's murder, denying any involvement and asserting that he had not left the base on the day of the incident. After corroborating his timeline with his colleagues, the police realized that there was a period of time during which Robert hadn't been seen, raising the possibility of his involvement in the murder. Surveillance footage from the base was obtained, but no sign of Robert leaving was observed. Nevertheless, he remained a suspect and couldn't be entirely ruled out. A DNA swab was taken from Robert to compare with the DNA found at the crime scene, and the results came as a surprise. There was no match. Robert was not Megan's killer. This setback left the officers feeling disheartened as they found themselves without any leads or suspects. Attention then shifted towards Chris, who had discovered her body. After obtaining a DNA sample, he was quickly ruled out as a suspect. Additionally, all of Megan's family members, including her younger brother Corey, were also cleared of any involvement. An autopsy later revealed the extreme brutality of the murder, with Megan being subjected to what was termed as overkill. The level of violence suggested intense anger from the perpetrator, raising questions about their motive given Megan's popularity and apparent lack of enemies. It seemed likely that the culprit was someone known to her, but with no apparent enemies, the mystery deepened regarding who would commit such a horrific act. As the investigation yielded no suspects, Megan's parents grappled with the unsettling prospect of her case remaining unresolved, depriving them of justice for their daughter. Detectives decided to delve deeper into Megan's school life, considering the possibility of a clandestine boyfriend, an admirer, or an adversary within her school community. They interrogated Megan's close friend in hopes of uncovering potential leads, but she was unable to provide any valuable insights. Subsequently, police interviewed other acquaintances from Woodrow Wilson High School, revealing that Megan had been involved in a few romantic relationships, but none of them were particularly serious. While none of these individuals emerged as suspects, the authorities decided to collect DNA samples from them as a precautionary measure to eliminate any potential connections. Forensic experts specializing in biogeographical analysis re-examined the DNA evidence collected from the crime scene in an effort to determine the geographical origin of the perpetrator. Their analysis suggested that they were searching for an African-American male. Despite 6 months elapsing with no significant progress in the case, a breakthrough occurred when a cooperative classmate provided the police with valuable information. A list of boys with whom Megan had occasionally engaged in flirtatious interactions. Upon review, all individuals on the list except one had already been interviewed. This exception was 17-year-old Robert Lee Barnes. In addition to her regular school education, Megan had also been enrolled in a performing arts program at Churchill High School, where Robert Barnes was also a participant. Megan had once told her close friend that she believed Robert had feelings for her, feelings she did not reciprocate. Robert Barnes, a talented violinist, was regarded as a diligent student who never encountered any disciplinary issues at school and was not known to cause trouble. He shared a close friendship with Megan and had even visited her home on several occasions, according to her parents, who described him as always polite and very kind. When the police located him for questioning regarding Megan, the interview followed the standard procedure, just like the other previous interviews they had carried out. Robert informed investigators that Megan was a kind and pleasant individual, expressing disbelief at the notion of anyone wishing her harm. He mentioned their participation in a recital together and their occasional hangouts. The police did not find anything suspicious during the interview until towards the end, when they asked Robert if he would provide a DNA sample. Robert hesitated before refusing, which raised eyebrows among the investigators, since all of Megan's other classmates had been cooperative. Robert politely explained that his mother wouldn't agree to it, but the police clarified that parental consent wasn't necessary, especially considering Robert was now 17 years old. Despite this, Robert declined once again. The investigators couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss with Robert Barnes. After concluding the interview, they instructed him to seek his mother's consent for the DNA sample and to contact them afterward. Later, the detective received a call from the lab analyzing the bubble gum. They inquired about the sample's origin and, after confirming that he had observed Robert placing the gum into the glove, questioned whether he had been under constant observation. To their surprise, the DNA the sample matched that of a female. Robert had switched the gum he was chewing with a different piece that he provided as his sample on October 23, 2008. Robert Barnes was summoned for questioning once more, this time accompanied by his mother. During the interview, when confronted with the DNA findings, Robert inadvertently revealed that the incident had occurred on a Thursday. Up to that point, none of the individuals interviewed by the police had been aware of the exact day and date of the murder. When the officers pointed this out to him, he provided an absurd explanation, claiming that on that particular day, Megan had asked him to come to her home, where he allegedly discovered her being held at gunpoint by a masked individual. According to Robert, the assailant then pointed the firearm at him and forced him to tie Megan up. Robert further claimed that he was compelled to sexually assault Megan under duress. Subsequently, he stated that they all went downstairs, where the gunman seized a knife and stabbed Megan. Robert claimed that the assailant then forced him to cut himself, ensuring his blood would be found at the crime scene. Robert had fabricated this narrative in an attempt to present himself as a victim and explain away any potentially incriminating evidence against him. However, law enforcement remained skeptical of his account and did not believe any of his claims. When confronted with the evidence of footprints, they questioned why only his footprints were found and not those of the alleged assailant. Robert's mother intervened, advising him to stop speaking and vouching for his character, claiming he was a good and innocent child. The police collected a sample of his DNA, and the analysis confirmed a match between Robert's DNA and the assailant, contradicting his claims. Robert Barnes was arrested for the murder of Megan Landowski. The news left Megan's parents in shock, as they could not comprehend how the quiet boy who used to ride the school bus with their daughter could be capable of such violence. According to the police, Robert likely gained entry to the home through the window that afternoon, surprising Megan in her bedroom before committing the atrocious acts. Megan managed to flee downstairs, but Robert pursued her, stabbing her with a kitchen knife and continuing to do so even after her death. Afterward, he left the scene and carried on with his life, as if nothing had occurred. The investigators speculated that Robert had developed an unhealthy obsession with Megan, while Megan only wanted a platonic relationship between them. When Robert's advances were rejected, he resorted to coercion, which ultimately led him down a destructive path that culminated in tragedy. In September 2009, Robert accepted a plea bargain that spared him from being tried as an adult, as he had recently turned 18. He pleaded guilty to charges of first-degree murder and aggravated sexual battery. Robert Lee Barnes was sentenced to 42 years in prison and remains incarcerated at the Red Onion State Prison in Wise County, Virginia. Whether driven by love, desire, bitterness, or the sting of rejection, Robert's actions and atrocious deeds towards someone he claimed to love and care for were not justified. Instead of accepting to move on, he chose a dark path that led to a tragic fate, ending the life of an innocent soul, and, in the process, ruining his life and affecting the lives of Megan's loved ones. Megan Landowski's tragic story mirrors countless others, highlighting the perilous consequences that can arise from such situations. We extend our heartfelt prayers and thoughts to her departed soul and the loved ones she left behind. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Lily James. Lily James was born in May 2002 in Yamba, New South Wales, Australia. She was the beloved first child of the close-knit James family, especially adored by her maternal grandmother, Barbara. Growing up by the ocean with her younger brother Max, Lily was known for her active and enduring nature, with a passion for swimming. Her father, who coached water polo at an Anglican girls' school, supported her interest. Her friends remembered her as sociable, friendly, and excelling in her studies, always willing to help others, which made her very popular. In her upper school years, Lily's achievements in academics, sports, and community life were recognized, and she was considered one of the best students. Her incredible talent to excel in all areas of activity was undeniable. She also had a passion for the dramatic arts, which led her to participate in the theatre and dance club. She was eventually invited to perform at the famous Woodford Folk Festival, one of Australia's largest annual events. During the event, Lily impressed the audience with her rendition of a monologue from William Shakespeare's Macbeth, showcasing her skills, charisma, and allure, and securing second place in the theatre category. In 2018, Lily passed her beginner's driving test, adding to her list of accomplishments. Her athletic successes were also noteworthy, as she began to pursue water polo professionally, earning the title of swimming champion in the under-17 category. Her parents were thrilled with her successes and celebrated each accomplishment grandly. By her senior year, Lily had decided to focus on a sports career, and in 2020, she enrolled at Sydney Technological University to pursue a bachelor's degree in sports business management. In 2021, Lily started a new job as a water polo coach at St. Andrew's Cathedral School to gain teaching experience and spice up her college routine. Thanks to her youth, vibrant personality, and love for sports, she quickly connected with her colleagues, the administration, and her students, trying to find a unique approach to each student and highlight their strengths. It was during this time that Lily met Paul, the new cricket and hockey coach, who caught her attention. Initially, their interaction was friendly and limited to mutual greetings, but it later developed into a romance. Lily fell in love, unaware of Paul's true nature. He showered her with compliments, gave her flowers, and organized evenings together. They agreed to keep their relationship private due to school policy and Lily's personal beliefs. However, over time, rumors began to spread, and Lily discovered that Paul had broken their agreement and portrayed her in a negative light. She felt betrayed and humiliated, so she confronted Paul and ended the relationship. On October 26, 2023, the principal of St. Andrew's Cathedral School in central Sydney sent an email to students and parents at 4:30 a.m., announcing that the school would be closed until the end of the week due to a critical incident. 2 hours later, a second notification reassured families that none of the students were involved in the incident. However, graduating students sitting for exams were exempt from the closure. The school provided psychological support to those affected by the situation. A 24/7 consultation center was set up in the school library to provide assistance. On Thursday and Friday, forensic teams thoroughly searched the school building and surrounding area. Access to the gym was restricted, and the adjacent shower area was scheduled for demolition. The reason for the school's closure was slowly revealed. On October 25, 2023, around midnight, the body of 20-year-old Lily James, the school's water polo coach, was found in the school shower. She had last been seen alive at 7 p.m. Surveillance cameras showed someone following her around 8 p.m., but the pursuer left alone and exited the school. Lily's parents raised the alarm when she failed to contact them, and the police were informed. A night guard discovered her body in a pool of blood with severe head injuries. After recovering from the shock, he called emergency services. Later, detectives invited a family friend to identify the body, which was difficult due to the severity of the injuries. The news of Lily's death sparked an outpouring of grief from the community. Her home was filled with friends, neighbors, and acquaintances offering support to her family. Locals also paid their respects, leaving flowers and toys outside her home, creating a memorial. In a shocking twist, another tragic death occurred on October 27, 2023, at 8 a.m., just 11 miles from the scene of Lily's death. A man's remains were discovered on the rocks of Diamond Bay Reserve, near Vaucluse, an eastern suburb of Sydney. After the police were called, a rescue team was quickly assembled, including a bomb squad, Marine Corps, and a rescue helicopter. At 3:30 p.m., they recovered the man's body and took it to forensic experts for identification. Due to the severity of his injuries from a high fall, visual identification was not possible, so fingerprints were used instead. The experts suspected the man's identity, but they needed confirmation. Eventually, they identified the body as 24-year-old Paul, who was suspected of committing a crime against Lily James. Investigators now had to piece together the connection between the two fatal incidents and uncover what had happened between them. Paul's later attempts to make amends and apologize were rebuffed by Lily, who remained unforgiving. She took comfort in the fact that their brief relationship had at least revealed his true nature to her. Born in 1999 in the Netherlands, Paul came from a wealthy and prominent family. When his father's job required a move to Australia in 2015, Paul and his family relocated. As an only child, he received excessive attention and pampering, which contributed to his selfish and entitled personality. Paul thrived academically and athletically at St. Andrew's Cathedral School, where he excelled in cricket and eventually became team captain. He was also involved in organizing extracurricular activities and festivals. While some of his peers found his confidence off-putting, he was charming and charismatic around girls. After graduating in 2017, Paul landed a job as an assistant coach for cricket and hockey. By early 2018, he took over the management of these sports teams. Despite feeling confident in his new role, Paul suddenly resigned and returned home to his family for unknown reasons. Back home, Paul pursued further education, earning a master's degree in sports management. During a conversation with old friends, he revealed that he had honed his coaching skills, which led to a lucrative job offer from his former employer. By early 2020, Paul returned to his old school. Upon his return to Australia, Paul reunited with a former friend, and they decided to split housing costs. Paul preferred shared living, despite being able to afford a solo apartment. Their economically priced apartment was in Kensington, a suburb of Sydney. Initially, the friends got along, socializing at bars after work. However, a few months later, tensions arose, and Paul decided to live alone due to their conflict. The Theson's son, Paul, felt isolated despite being constantly surrounded by people. His parents suspected he had not had a serious romantic relationship. In March 2020, an 18-month lockdown in Australia. Paul was stuck in the country, unable to visit his family due to the risk of infection. The strict quarantine measures affected every aspect of life, forcing Paul to rely on himself. By summer 2021, life had returned to normal. However, it became apparent that the isolation had taken a toll on Paul's relationships. When he resumed his activities, people noticed a change in his character and behavior. Paul bounced back, becoming a key player on the hockey team and maintaining an active lifestyle, even appearing in match advertisements. Paul's behavior became increasingly disturbing. Friends and acquaintances reported seeing him lash out in uncontrollable anger, a side of him they had never witnessed before. Rumors also circulated at school that he had an inappropriate interest in his female students, often flirting with them and making them feel uncomfortable. Despite this, Paul was still highly regarded for his coaching skills, which significantly contributed to the team's success in the Australian Hockey League. However, his personal life began to unravel when his girlfriend Lily ended their relationship after he was put on trial. The investigation into Paul's involvement in her murder quickly gained momentum. Surveillance cameras inside and outside the area where the body was found played a crucial role in identifying him as the prime suspect. The police also tracked his movements using his cell phone's GPS and contacted his service provider to determine his last known location. The police were also eager to find the victim's phone, hoping it would contain clues about the events leading up to her death. After tracing the locations of the devices, they reconstructed the timeline of events and found that Paul had purchased a hammer at a hardware store a couple of days before the attack. It appeared that Paul was consumed by anger and decided to confront the girl violently. Lily's innocence in the situation was clear, but the events that unfolded were as follows. On the morning of October 25th, Lily went to the university and then to her job in the afternoon. Meanwhile, her ex-boyfriend rented a silver Lexus and drove to the school, but he didn't enter the building because he had no classes. Instead, he waited in the car. After the students left the building, the perpetrator walked to the gym, hiding a hammer under his jacket. He waited for Lily to finish her training, then followed her when she went to freshen up and take a shower. This was when Lily was most vulnerable, and the perpetrator attacked her, striking her head. According to pathologists, her death was instantaneous, and she did not suffer. An hour later, He gathered Lily's personal belongings in a backpack and left the building. He got into his car and drove to Diamond Bay, where he disposed of the hammer in a garbage container. Security cameras recorded him at the reserve at 8:47 p.m. Paul's last known location, as tracked by investigators, was The Gap, a cliff in Sydney's eastern suburb of South Head. The Gap is a popular tourist spot, but it's also infamous for its history of suicides. At around 10 p.m., Paul used Lily's phone to send a message to someone called James, which would ultimately lead to the discovery of the girl's body. It's unclear why Paul did this. Possibly he felt remorseful and wanted to ensure the girl received help. Or maybe he was simply telling her parents where they could find their daughter. He made a brief emergency call an hour after the incident, but hung up. He then went to a cliff and took his own life, which had been a decision he had been considering for a long time. When the police arrived, they found the personal belongings of him and his former lover, as well as a rented car parked nearby. It seemed clear that he was no longer alive, possibly due to his inability to cope with his guilt or face the consequences of his actions. The priority was now to find his body. A search operation began on October 26th at 9 a.m., with police helicopters and boats patrolling the coastline and cordoning off the area around the cliff at Diamond Bay. However, no body was found on the first day. The next day, his body washed up on the rocks of the reserve. After an autopsy, Paul was officially declared responsible for Lily James's death. Although it was impossible to hold him accountable due to his own death, the criminal case was closed. His parents received his body and decided to cremate him and scatter his ashes in Sydney, rather than returning him to the Netherlands. Lily's funeral was held on November 17, 2023, at her former school in Hurstville, where around 500 people gathered to bid farewell to a loved one, friend, and coach. The school administration arranged a live broadcast of the ceremony. In line with Lily's lively and vibrant personality, her family requested that attendees wear bright colors instead of traditional dark attire. The ceremony was filled with heartfelt tributes to Lily, as speakers shared warm and sincere words about her. The James family expressed gratitude to everyone who had supported them during their difficult time. Outside the building, students and colleagues created a makeshift memorial featuring Lily's favorite flowers, accompanied by farewell letters as a sign of respect and admiration. After the investigation into Lily's tragic death was completed, the school management sent a follow-up email to parents, apologizing for the impact of the tragedy and assuring them that the incident was unforeseen and would not happen again. While many were shocked that a place of safety had been breached, the administration encouraged students to view this as an isolated incident and to continue their education with renewed enthusiasm. Renowned forensic psychologist Tim Watson-Monroe, an expert in analyzing the minds of both criminals and victims, was consulted about Paul's actions. His analysis revealed that Paul's behavior was characteristic of individuals with inflated self-esteem who cannot accept rejection. According to Monroe, Paul did not act impulsively, but rather deliberately and without remorse. Monroe believed that Paul took his own life to avoid taking responsibility and facing shame for his actions. He described Paul as a narcissistic individual with psychopathic tendencies. Monroe also distinguished Paul's case from the tragic tale of Romeo and Juliet, as their narratives were fundamentally different. Ultimately, Paul's pride and ego clouded his judgment, leading him to make devastating decisions. He failed to appreciate the love and companionship of Lily, and instead chose deceit and betrayal. In the end, Paul's selfishness resulted in the loss of Lily's life, as well as enduring suffering for both their families. His actions were a bitter repayment for the care and attention he received from those who loved him. Sadistic serial killer Michael Madison. 2 weeks shy of Halloween 1977, Michael Madison was born on October 15th in Cleveland, Ohio. His parents, Diane Madison and John Baldwin, accidentally got pregnant and didn't have much of a relationship at the time of his birth. John Baldwin left Diane to care for their young son and denied being Michael's father. Growing up, Diane's mother had been a sex worker and heroin addict. She grew up in a household full of neglect. Diane's upbringing left her unprepared to care for her young son independently. Shortly after giving birth to her son, Michael, social workers were brought into the home. Diane was allowing her constant stream of boyfriends to punish Michael. When Michael was 2, Diane was found to have forcefully stuffed food down Michael's throat. As a result, the toddler began vomiting uncontrollably. Unsure of what to do, Diane put her screaming son into a tub full of hot water. This caused Michael to cry more. Growing frustrated with her young son, Diane took him out of the bath and beat him with an extension cord. A year later, one of Diane's many boyfriends beat Michael so severely with a belt that the young boy vomited and needed to be hospitalized. In another horrific incident, Michael was beaten so severely by another one of Diane's boyfriends that he lost hearing in one of his ears. After years of abuse, Michael was sent to live with his grandmother, who was still a heroin addict and sex worker. But unfortunately, Michael's horrific childhood wouldn't change. Michael continued to be hospitalized for reasons such as dehydration. The social workers involved in Michael's case would note that he and his half-brother were covered in scratches and bruises. Before Michael reached high school, he had become a familiar face to law enforcement. On several occasions, the teenager had been found using lemon. In high school, he received a delinquent charge for inappropriately touching another classmate. The crimes Michael committed as a teenager were nothing like the ones he would go on to commit as an adult. In July 2013, the family of 38-year-old Angela Deskins reported her missing after they hadn't heard from her since June. Deskins was known for disappearing from time to time, so the family didn't think much of it. A month after she went missing, her body was discovered wrapped in electrical cords with a belt around her neck. 28-year-old Shadisha Sheely was reported missing in September 2012 when she didn't show up at her mother's house. Sheely, along with her 12-year-old daughter, were living with extended family at the time, and Sheely was supposed to stop by her mother's house to borrow some money, but she never showed. Her body was found in July 2013 inside a plastic garbage bag. After returning home from her job at an elementary school, 18-year-old Sherelda Terry disappeared. Her body was also found inside a black trash bag. On July 19, 2013, Michael's neighbors called the police to report a horrible smell coming from a garage near his second-floor apartment building. Inside the garage, the police discovered the decomposing body of a woman. During the police search of the surrounding area, including other vacant homes and backyards, the police found the bodies of 2 more women. Each was wrapped in plastic bags and located approximately 200 yards apart. The police were granted a search warrant for Michael's home, and inside they found further evidence of decomposition. Now the search was on to find where Michael Madison was. The police tracked him down to his mother's house. When they arrived, Michael refused to come out, resulting in a several-hour-long standoff between him and the police before he finally agreed to come out and was taken into police custody. Michael never once showed remorse to the victims' families during the trial. Michael laughed, smiled, and taunted the families. During Sherelda Terry's father's victim impact statement, Michael smiled at the distraught father. This set Terry's father off, and he tried to attack Michael but was quickly stopped. Michael didn't stop smiling once during the altercation. The jury deliberated less than a day before Michael Madison was found guilty of all 3 murders. He was also found guilty of 3 counts of kidnapping, 3 counts of gross abuse of a corpse, 1 count of rape, and 1 count of weapons possession by an ex-convict. On May 20, 2016, Michael was sentenced to death, a sentence he would attempt to appeal a month later. On July 21, 2020, the Ohio Supreme Court voted unanimously to uphold the death sentence for Michael Madison. Killer Ronald O'Brien. Children are cautioned from an early age not to accept candy from strangers. While this golden rule is strictly enforced by vigilant parents throughout the year, on Halloween night, they throw caution to the wind and allow their little ones to go door to door asking for treats. In most instances, their request is granted without worry. Even so, once in a while, the monsters that lurk in the shadows take advantage of the occasion, resulting in dire consequences for the most innocent among us. In 1974, a boy in Pasadena, Texas fell victim to just such a predator when he became violently ill after indulging in a treat from his Halloween bag. Ever the concerned parent, his father had stayed by his side during the hour-long ordeal, offering comfort to the youngster as he convulsed on the bathroom floor. Only 8 years old at the time, Timothy O'Brien died later that night on his way to the hospital. In a shocking turn of events, an autopsy revealed that he had ingested enough potassium cyanide to kill 2 grown men. As difficult as it was to believe, all signs pointed to the fact that someone had deliberately laced candy with the colorless compound before randomly handing it out to unsuspecting children. Investigators were convinced that a cold-blooded killer was hiding somewhere in the suburbs of Houston, and they intended to find him. With no suspects in mind and little evidence to go on, detectives theorized that an unscrupulous person who was angry at the world in general had decided to take the life of a complete stranger, a child no less, as a way of getting back at society. To make a difficult situation even worse, there was no telling how many children had received the tainted sweets. Although authorities had put out an emergency news bulletin requesting that all Halloween candy be brought to the police station for inspection, they feared that there would be other victims before all was said and done. While they faced an uphill battle, to be sure, investigators did have a few things working in their favor. For one, it had been raining heavily on the evening of Trick or Treat, which had limited the number of houses that Timothy and his sister Elizabeth had visited. More importantly, a chemical analysis of the contents of the boys' treat bag had enabled them to pinpoint the carrier of the poison. Lab tests revealed that the killer's lethal weapon of choice had been the sweet and sour powder contained inside of a straw-shaped pixie sticks. After meeting with the residents of the houses where the O'Brien children were known to have gotten candy, detectives were confident that none of them had given up pixie sticks. However, during the course of their interviews, they learned that someone had been witnessed doling out that particular treat and that someone had been Timothy's father, Ronald O'Brien. When he was brought in for questioning, O'Brien claimed that a man he had never seen before had emerged from a darkened home and given him several pixie sticks to hand out on his behalf. He added that, after consuming a small amount of the sugary powder, Timothy had complained that it tasted funny. Instead of telling him to throw it out, he had given his son a soft drink to help wash it down. Under the pretense of helping police solve the case, he had readily provided them with the address of the house where the exchange had taken place. Upon speaking with the mystery man, who turned out to be an air traffic controller named Courtney Melvin, officers learned that he had an alibi for the night in question. According to him, he had been at work and had not returned home until well after midnight. When they visited his place of employment, his supervisor confirmed his story and had the paperwork to prove it. In a stunning show of support, 200 of Melvin's coworkers came forward to vouch for his character. Realizing that they had been duped, investigators quickly concluded that this man was not their killer, something that Ronald O'Brien had known all along. A bit of digging into his past uncovered that Ronald O'Brien, who had trained as an optician, was not nearly as respectable as he wanted others to believe. I'm not content who couldn't hold a job, he was drowning in a sea of debt. Not above taking what he wanted, he had been accused of stealing on numerous occasions, usually by former employers. While being shiftless and prone to theft doesn't necessarily mean that someone is capable of murder, the fact that O'Brien had taken out hefty life insurance policies, not one but 3, on his children in the months prior to his son's untimely death moved him to the top of the list of suspects. Another nail in O'Brien's self-constructed coffin came when it was discovered that he had phoned the insurance company on the morning after his son's death, inquiring about a payout. As the 8-year-old's body lay in the icy morgue, his father's only concern had been how quickly the money he had coming would change hands. On November 5, 1974, less than a week after Timothy was poisoned, Ronald O'Brien was taken into custody and formally charged with 1 count of murder and 4 counts of attempted murder. To no one's surprise, he pleaded not guilty across the board. He would steadfastly maintain his innocence throughout the trial, despite the damning evidence against him. During the proceedings, a parade of witnesses testified that O'Brien had become fixated on the properties of cyanide in the months leading up to his son's murder. His obsession led him to brazenly ask friends and family alike if they knew where he could purchase the deadly poison. He would also inquire of them if they had any idea how much of the substance it would take to kill a person. In June of 1975, 8 months after little Timothy O'Brien had been laid to rest, his father was convicted of his murder. He was also found guilty in the attempted poisonings of the other 4 children, none of whom had ingested the lethal powder. For his crimes, Ronald O'Brien, whom the press had dubbed the Candyman, was condemned to the electric chair. Down the road, as alternative methods of execution were introduced, his punishment was amended to a more humane death by lethal injection. It had taken the jury just over an hour to decide the fate of the man who had so callously plotted and carried out the murder of someone who had trusted him implicitly. Once the verdict was in, the waiting game began. As it happened, 9 years would pass, more time than Timothy had spent on this earth before his killer would face final justice. During his time on death row, O'Brien was reviled by his fellow inmates who, despite their own misdeeds, considered him to be lower than a snake's belly. Their hatred of the child killer ran so deep that they had thrown a party on the day of his demise to let him know that he would not be missed. After several days of execution, O'Brien was put to death on March 31st, 1984, at the age of 39. When asked if he had any last words, he had taken the opportunity to rail against the system that had allowed him to come to such an end. When his death was announced over the loudspeaker, hundreds of people who had gathered outside the prison to celebrate the occasion had shouted "trick or treat" while throwing handfuls of candy in the air in remembrance of Timothy, a young boy who had paid the ultimate price for his father's greed. Todd Allen Reed, the Forest Park killer. The bodies of 3 women were found in the same stretch of parkland, all within a month of each other. It was not long before police had their man. But is he responsible for more than the 3 murders they convicted him for? 32-year-old Todd Allen Reed was already a registered sex offender when he strangled to death at least 3 women before dunking their naked bodies in Forest Park, a heavily wooded area just west of Portland, Oregon. From 1992 to 1995, he had served a measly 2.5 years of a 12-year sentence for the sexual assault of Shelley Harding, who was 7 months pregnant at the time of his cowardly attack. She had been walking home from work when he approached her and forced her into his car at knife point. Reed was involved to him and fled the scene of a minor crash with another vehicle on his way to the secluded spot where he sexually assaulted Shelley. After he had assaulted her, he attempted to strangle her with a seatbelt and began to cry. Shelley was strong and she was calm. She had been talking to Reed constantly, like he was a friend almost, building a rapport. Whilst doing so, she made sure to leave as much physical evidence as she could, touching every surface to leave as many of her prints as possible. Whatever this monster was going to do to her, she wasn't going to make it easy for him to get away with. When Reed broke down, she used this to her advantage, and her pleas to be let go and her promises that she would not tell anyone worked. Reed let her go. Not only did Shelley report her abduction and assault, the 2 men that had been in the car that Reed had crashed into also reported the hit and run. They even had his license plate. Reed pleaded no contest and was handed the 12-year sentence. He was registered as a sex offender and, crucially, his DNA was taken and stored in the state crime lab. This would be the golden ticket police needed to catch the Forest Park serial killer 7 years later. Reed was released early as he had built up sentence-reducing credits, half of which were for good behavior. At roughly 8 miles long and 5,100 acres, Forest Park is one of the largest urban forest reserves in the USA, ranked 19th to be more precise. It is not easy to wander from the 70 miles of trails due to the park's dense vegetation. To highlight just how secluded this park can get once you're off trail, in 2004, a 53-year-old man called Frank and his 12-year-old daughter Ruth were discovered to be living off-grid in the park. They had been there for 4 years, completely undetected. On May 7, 1999, a couple walking their dog on one of the park's more remote trails would come across the body of 28-year-old Wella Faye Mahler. She was naked and face down, entangled in thick blackberry brambles. She had been strangled, and it was determined that her body had been there for around 2 months. police would find a used condom merely 28 feet from her body. They were able to extract DNA from this vital piece of evidence. The next day, May 8th, police themselves would discover a second body whilst they were searching the immediate area. The body of 26-year-old Stephanie Lynn Muscle was found around a quarter of a mile away from where Lilla had been discovered. She too was found naked and had been strangled. Tests would determine she had been left there less than a week before she was found. They would also recover traces of DNA on her thighs. A group of hikers would find the third body, that of 18-year-old Alexandria Eisen, in the early evening of June 2nd. Alexandria had been reported missing sometime in May. Police were unable to reach her body until the next day. Due to the location, she'd been dumped down an extremely steep slope just off of a deer path. She was found naked and she too had been strangled. Her body was around 1/4 of a mile away from Lilla and Stephanie's. After the discovery of Alexandria's body, Police Chief Charles Moves admitted that investigators had concluded they were looking for a serial killer due to the similarities of the crimes. Physically, all three women resembled each other, but they also had very similar life experiences. They were all homeless at the time of their deaths and had cocaine and heroin addictions, although Stephanie had just completed a detox program before her murder. Lilla and Alexandria had been at some point engaged in prostitution to pay for these addictions. All three women were known to frequent West Burnside Street. It's also been claimed that Lilla and Stephanie knew each other, although this has not been proven either way. It was determined that all three of the women had been murdered elsewhere and their bodies were taken to Forest Park afterwards. Toxicology all showed that they had taken heroin sometime before their deaths. The police response was immediate and it was impressive. A specialist task force consisting of 16 individuals was formed and they set about scouting bars, reaching out and offering protection to the community being targeted, and 30 additional beds were made available for homeless women during the investigation. Although residents were not happy about the lack of information they were receiving, the police kept their investigation tightly under wraps. Such was their determination to catch this killer. The task force would use the physical similarities of the three women to their advantage. A female officer of a similar appearance posed as a prostitute on West Burnside Street to see if they could reel the killer in. And sure enough, Reed took the bait. On the July 7th, the same day a vigil was being held for Lilla, Stephanie, and Alexandria, Reed approached the undercover officer, and it was not long before his suspicious behavior flagged him to police. At about 5:20 a.m., he was approached by a member of the lookout team, Sergeant John Botchlet. Reed readily admitted that he was a sex offender and agreed to a search of his vehicle. They found an unused condom, a book entitled The Killing Gift, about a woman who can kill men by merely looking at them, and some yellow strapping. There was nothing incriminating to be found, and the police had to let him go. He was not off the hook, however, far from it. Another lookout that night, Detective Sergeant Dave Schlegel, recognized him from the 1992 sexual assault case. He had in fact been the arresting officer. Police began 24-hour surveillance of Reed, both at his home and at his place of work. At least once during this surveillance, he was observed driving in circles around West Burnside and Sandy Boulevard. The police swab results came back and confirmed that the DNA from the condom at the Moore crime scene and the DNA found on Stephanie's thighs matched the DNA that was on file for Todd Allen Reed. At around 7:30 p.m. on July 18th, after Reed had left for work, police executed a search warrant at his address, where he lived with his girlfriend. Once the police had left the premises, his girlfriend phoned him to let him know the police had been there. He attempted to make a getaway in the middle of his shift, but it was too late. The police had already arrived. At 11:30 p.m. on July 18th, 11 days after police had questioned him and only 1.5 months after the task force was set up, Reed was arrested outside of Ranella Produce, the warehouse where he worked night shifts, unloading the delivery trucks. On July 27th, he was indicted on 7 criminal counts in relation to 3 homicides. It emerged that Reed, who had been ordered to serve 8 years post-prison supervision, had actually been kicked out of a sex offender treatment program 2 weeks before his arrest for failure to attend. On February 23, 2001, he pleaded guilty and received 3 consecutive life sentences with no possibility of parole. Reed had been facing the death penalty, but his plea deal took this off of the table. Reed is also the prime suspect in 2, possibly 3, other murders in the Portland area. The cases being referred to by Reed are the 1987 cold case murders of 15-year-old Jennifer Lyncher and 12-year-old Mindy Colleen Thomas, and the 1999 disappearance of 19-year-old Alma Vecines. In regards to the murders, Gresham Police Sergeant David Lerwick has been quoted as saying, "Always suspect that he was the person who killed both those girls. We didn't have enough evidence to convict him." Jennifer had gone missing on July 3, 1987, and her skeletal remains was found on July 8, 1988. Mingy went missing from the apartment complex where she lived on August 3, 1987, and her body was discovered on October 4, 1988. Both of the children had been strangled and dumped in wooded areas on the eastern side of Gresham, about 3 miles apart, and they were both last seen in the company of Gail Bennett, Reed's then girlfriend and later wife. They married in 1988 and divorced in 1997. Gresham police said Bennett, who has a police record of her own, might have information about the killings but has been uncooperative. Bennett has denied any knowledge. At the time, police were operating under the assumption that they had both been killed by the same man, and that this man was known to them. They had questioned Reed at the time of the investigation due to the fact they had both been seen with Gail, but he was never charged or arrested. Police renewed efforts to solve the Gresham cases after his arrest in the Portland killings, but attempts to compare DNA from the old crimes with Reed's DNA have been inconclusive. Alma the witness seen on June 30, 1999, and has not been seen since. She was working as a prostitute at the time of her disappearance, and it has been claimed she knew/was friends with Alexandria Eisen. No charges have been brought forward in her case, although it is impossible to downplay the likelihood they already had something to do with Ametha's disappearance. As of June 2020, what prison Reed is in is not known, and as of June 2021, he was no longer listed as an inmate and may be dead.